Oh, hello my friends. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you are enjoying the videos. For more, please like, share, and subscribe. Hey guys, I am sorry. I know I am posting very late, but my AI voice cloning subscription ended, so I was unable to produce more parts sooner. I had to borrow some money from my cousins, but that's all okay. Now I can make this part. Also, I wanted to know if you guys will do buy me coffee if I start one. Now, without further ado, let's jump right in. A flying ship soared across the sky, and its destination was none other than Brynhildr Academy. Standing on the deck of the ship were two teenagers who had been looking forward to arriving at their destination. They were none other than Cedric and Lillian, who were also part of the delegations sent by their headmaster, Nero, to confirm their suspicions about Brynhildr Academy. After the gate had closed, Nero had talked to Clara, who was the team leader of their expedition. The fourth-year student confirmed that, after spreading her talismans to the entirety of the Deathseeker forest, no traces of the ancient Wendigo could be found. This case was simply impossible to happen because no matter how good the vile creature was at hiding its presence, it would still leak a bit of its power, which would then be sensed by Clara's talismans. However, after capturing King Manticore and dedicating their remaining time to finding the ancient Wendigo, their search came to a dead end. Because of this, Clara and Nero couldn't help but have suspicions about its disappearance. In the end, since they had no proof whatsoever, they could only use proper channels to ask Brynhildr Academy to cooperate with their investigation. Nero even pulled some strings and bribed a few magistratus to accompany his students. He wanted these powerful wizards to intimidate Ethan's teammates and find out if they really captured the ancient Wendigo or knew where it went when the battle ended. I'll finally see Sir Ethan soon, Lillian thought as a faint blush appeared on her face. If not for the fact that she had a duty to help the members of Nightfall Academy capture the ancient Wendigo, she might have followed Ethan's group as they explored the Legacy domain. Also, after hearing that the King Manticore's capture was largely due to the fact that Ethan and his team arrived to help her brother, Cedric, Lillian's infatuation with the handsome young man only grew. Witches were naturally attracted to handsome and powerful wizards. Of course, some wizarding families also looked at the person's background, but Lillian didn't care about that part one bit. Since Ethan already had the looks and the power to prove his worth, his attraction to witches like her was very fatal. Cedric was also looking forward to arriving at the academy, but unlike his sister, the one he wanted to meet the most was none other than Luna. He just couldn't forget the angelic beauty who managed to make his heart skip a beat after he saw her for the first time. During the battle against the ancient Wendigo, he did his best to protect her, but he fell short of his objective. If Ethan hadn't arrived to save her, the first lady whom Cedric loved might have died right in front of his eyes. An hour later, they finally saw the academy from the sky. All hands ready for descent. The captain's declaration reverberated across the flying ship, signaling that it was time to land at their destination. In the training grounds of Brynhildr Academy, spells flew toward Ethan, coming from every direction. Since he didn't have time to kiss anyone to gain some magic power, he resorted to simply dodging most of the spells aimed in his direction. In the end, he was forced to use a bit of Sebastian's power, creating a dome of water using the blue gem embedded in his sea god's trident. He didn't use the dome of water to block the spells. Instead, he used it to counterattack. Since the volume of water he had was limited, he made sure that every attack hit its target. Nicole, who was fighting not far from him, grinned fearlessly as she unleashed fire bullets and ice bullets in every direction. She was still holding back and only used basic spells to fight against her classmates who were hell-bent on gaining merit points by ganging up on Ethan and her. Sir Lionel and the other students watched the battle with solemn expressions on their faces. The teenagers were observing the battle seriously, as if they were trying to learn Ethan's and Nicole's attack patterns. They wanted to find any kind of weakness that they could exploit in order to gain the upper hand when their turn to fight them finally came. Chloe zigzagged above the arena with her flying broom. She had already summoned her familiar, Khan, and the two of them were unleashing fire bullets at Ethan, hopping to land a hit on his body. "Why can't you just let me hit you once?" Chloe complained as Ethan dodged and blocked her spells with his trident. "Do you really not want me to gain merit points that badly?" Originally, Chloe thought that, since Ethan was her lover, the handsome young man would allow her to hit him with a spell or two. However, contrary to her expectations, Ethan was doing his best to defend against all of her attacks, making her pout. Of course, Ethan knew what Chloe was thinking. However, that didn't mean that he would allow her to sneak in some cheap shots while he was busy defending against his other classmates. Ethan understood that letting her win would be detrimental to her growth, so he fought seriously to the best of his ability. Truth be told, everyone thought that Ethan would be an easier target than Nicole. Because of this, 14 out of the 20 spells would always be aimed in his direction. Suddenly, a flying ship hovered above the training grounds, making everyone stop their attacks. Several wizards and witches, riding on flying brooms, emerged from the ship and descended upon the training grounds. If not for the fact that Sir Lionel had recognized the emblem on the flag of the flying ship, he might have already attacked the newcomers for coming to disrupt his lesson. "It's good to see you again, Sir Ethan." A beautiful young lady with long blonde hair and blue eyes greeted as she landed a few meters away from Ethan. "I had a feeling that she would be one of the members of the delegation," Ethan thought as he looked at the young lady who had developed a crush on him in Nightfall Academy. Chloe, who had been targeting Ethan with fire bullets, frowned when she saw the beautiful witch who was looking at Ethan with a sweet smile on her face. Because of this, she landed beside Ethan and tugged on his robe. "Who is she?" Chloe inquired. "Her name is Lillian," Ethan replied. "She's a first year in Nightfall Academy." Chloe narrowed her eyes. "What is your relationship with her?" "Friends," Ethan answered. "She helped protect Lunar in the Legacy domain." After hearing that the young beauty had helped protect her best friend, Chloe decided to not antagonize the young lady who was looking at her cousin like a maiden in love. When Lillian heard that Ethan thought of her as a friend, the smile on her face widened a bit. She was half expecting that the handsome young man would only call her an acquaintance, so when he called her his friend, she felt happy inside. Lillian understood that she couldn't take shortcuts in love, so she was fine with starting out as friends. "My name is Lillian Raylight," Lillian said as she did a curtsy. "It's a pleasure to meet you, MS." "Gremory," Chloe replied. "My name is Chloe Gremory." Lillian was surprised because Ethan's surname was also Gremory. She then looked at the young lady with curiosity, wanting to know more about her relationship with Ethan. But before any of them could continue talking, Sir Lionel cleared his throat and looked at the delegation of Nightfall Academy with a frown. "We are currently in the middle of a lesson, so I would greatly appreciate it if outsiders were to move to the side," Sir Lionel said. "You're the delegation of the Nightfall Academy, right? This is not the place where you should park your flying ship. Take it away and stop disturbing my lesson." At that moment, someone landed in front of Lionel and gave the knightly professor a friendly smile. "Sorry, Professor," a man with slightly tanned skin said with a smile. "I'll make sure that my students behave." He turned to his back. "Oi, all of you get away from the arena. Captain, please land the flying ship at the designated landing point." The captain of the flying ship barked his orders, and half a minute later, the ship finally left the training grounds. The students of Nightfall Academy also moved to the side of the arena. They were very curious to see what kind of training the students of Brynhildr Academy were doing, so they obeyed their professor's orders without any complaints. "Is that better, Professor Lionel?" "Shut up and scram, Peyton. You're ugly as ever." "Is that what you'd say to someone whom you had borrowed a large sum of money from in the past?" Peyton looked at his friend with a dumbfounded look on his face. Sir Lionel clicked his tongue before pointing to the side of the arena, where the rest of the students of Nightfall Academy were standing. Peyton could only shake his head helplessly as he walked towards his students. Since he was the one at fault, he decided to wait until Lionel's lesson ended before the two of them did some catching up and talked about old times like they used to do. What is he doing? Cedric thought as he looked at Ethan, who was simply dodging and blocking the attacks being aimed in his direction. He could have easily defeated his classmates. Is he playing with them? The second year, who once fought against Ethan in a magical duel, couldn't understand why the handsome young man was not fighting using his full powers. Clara, who had come as part of the delegation, was having the same thought. She believed that Ethan could have easily defeated his classmates if he fought like he had in his duel with Cedric. Is he perhaps holding back since we are here? Clara mused. Does he not want us to learn more about his fighting abilities? This was the only reason Clara could think of as she looked at the young man, who was clearly being targeted by his classmates. Nicole would receive some attacks from time to time, but compared to Ethan, it was simply laughable. Maybe they just hate his guts, Clara thought. Also, only witches are attacking Nicole. The boys are all targeting Ethan. Do they perhaps hold a grudge against him? What she didn't know was that this was one of the main reasons why Ethan was being targeted. Most of the boys in the first years had a crush on Luna, Lily, and Nicole. Since Ethan was always close with these beautiful ladies, they treated him as their public enemy #1. Since they were given an opportunity where they could attack him without repercussions, they were going all out. A few minutes later, "Okay, that's enough," Sir Lionel stepped in to stop the battle. "Ethan and Nicole will get 10 minutes rest. The second batch will fight in 10 minutes. Ethan closed his eyes as he tried to stabilize his breathing. He was out of magical powers, so he had used a bit of Sebastian's power to conjure a dome of water. Using that allowed him to survive the combined attacks of his classmates, which made him feel a little bitter inside. "Do they really hate me that much?" Ethan mused. "Or are they just afraid to attack Nicole because she might retaliate later?" The young man closed his eyes as he tried to stabilize his breathing. He only had 10 minutes to prepare for his next battle, and he would use the time he had to the best of his ability. Suddenly, she felt something soft press against his right cheek. When he opened his eyes, he saw Lillian using a hand towel to carefully wipe the sweat off his face. At first, he wanted to ask her to stop, but Sebastian and his other half started making a ruckus inside of his head, telling him to leave the young lady alone. "Ethan, her legacy harmonizes perfectly with yours. If you chase this girl away, being able to utilize the Tide Bringer's legacy on land is just a pipe dream," Sebastian stated. "You'll forever be a half-baked Tide Bringer at this rate. Do you really think that all your battles will be at sea? Think again, my guy. If you really want to protect those you hold sacred, then you must use all and any available means to get stronger," Ethan's other half commented. "You've only gotten a bit better after spending more than a year in the lands of Alastair. If you think that's enough, then think again. Someone like Lily's older brother can easily wipe the floor using you." Ethan couldn't refute any of their words because they were hitting him where it hurt. Sebastian was right. He was truly unable to unleash his full powers on land, and he couldn't possibly ask his opponents to fight him in the sea, where he had an advantage. Also, his other half knew him better because he had been with him from the start. Ethan had indeed grown way stronger than he was after entering World Academy. But in the face of someone like Canal, he would easily die if they were to fight him seriously. Because of this, he sighed in his heart and allowed Lillian to wipe the sweat off his face. Seeing that he didn't reject her initiative, the young lady smiled and continued to wipe his sweat. She even allowed him to drink from her water pouch, which made his classmates look at him in disdain. "Another beauty has fallen into his grasp. I must kill this bastard. Damn, he's just a little bit better looking than me, yet he makes all the ladies fawn over him. This girl from Nightfall Academy is quite beautiful. Did he go there just to pick up girls? He already has Chloe, but he's still trying to charm any beautiful girl he sees. Just you wait. I'm going to blast you to oblivion." The second batch, who was about to fight Ethan, was all fired up after seeing this jealousy-inducing display of affection. Even Chloe, who had lowered her guard against Lillian after hearing that she had helped protect her best friend from the ancient Wendigo, had a frown on her face. It seems that Luna was right. Chloe narrowed her eyes. She thinks fondly of Ethan. Luna had told her everything that had happened in Nightfall Academy. This included her suspicion of Lillian wanting to become one of Ethan's lovers, especially after what happened after the duel ended. Chloe was also aware that the handsome blonde guy, who had the same hair and eye color as Lillian, was making a move on her best friend. Because of this, her impression of Cedric instantly hit rock bottom. Both of them are trouble, Chloe thought as she looked at the brother and sister pair, whose eyes were locked onto her cousin's body. A few minutes later, Sir Lionel declared that the break was over. Nicole, who wasn't as tired as Ethan, lightly tapped the young man's shoulder before pointing at their opponents. "Looks like your little reunion with Lillian has fired up their will to fight you," Nicole chuckled. "Good luck, Mr. Popular." Ethan snorted as he held the sea god's trident firmly in his hand. He had already resigned himself to being targeted this time around as well. But since this was considered good training, he was also looking forward to it. Seeing his reaction, Nicole just smiled and took a fighting stance beside him. It had been a while since she saw Ethan get serious, and this might be a good opportunity to gauge his current strength while he was not relying on his powers. Finally, it's over. Ethan sighed in relief as their martial arts instructor, Sir Lionel, declared the end of the second batch of mock battles. Ethan didn't completely come out of this battle scot-free because his classmates weren't that weak. Not to mention, there wasn't much he could do since he was unable to use any kind of magic. Some were able to land their hits on him after getting past his defenses. But due to his strong body constitution and Nicole's timely assistance, he was able to shrug off the weaker spells that had managed to land on his body. Overall, this mock battle helped Ethan better understand that he would need to be more resourceful when fighting large groups on his own. Of course, if he had magical powers when fighting them, things would have ended differently. "Good job taking that punishment," Nicole commented as she patted Ethan's shoulder. "Why didn't you use magic?" "Have you forgotten that I'm a dud?" Ethan replied. "Duds can't use magic." Nicole wanted to roll her eyes at the shameless guy, who was still calling himself a dud despite all of his achievements. In fact, many in the academy believed that Ethan wasn't really a dud, and the appraisal stone might have made a mistake when assigning his manner. However, Professor Reinhardt assured them that the appraisal stone hadn't made a mistake. When asked if duds could pull off the things that Ethan did in the past, the headmaster merely brushed them off, simply saying that Ethan was a special kind of dud. As to what a special kind of dud meant, he refused to elaborate any further. Ethan had also stored one of Luna's compressed magical powers in his heart, but he didn't plan to use it unless it was a last resort. Since he was now able to retain and use magic for a longer time, he believed that using Luna's reserved magical powers in a mock battle would be a waste. He would rather use it when fighting against Canal-level opponents, allowing him to launch a surprise attack against them when they least expected it. The moment Ethan stepped down from the arena, he found himself facing Clara, who had several questions just for him. "That was a good battle, Mr. Gremory," Clara said. "My name is Clara, and I am the team leader of Nightfall Academy in the Legacy Gate expedition. Pleased to make your acquaintance." Clara offered her hand for a handshake, and Ethan accepted her gesture. "I've already been told of your purpose for coming here to the academy," Ethan stated. "You still haven't found the monster inside the Legacy domain." "No," Clara replied as she gave the young man an appraising look. "We have every reason to believe that someone snatched it up." "I see," Ethan nodded. "That's a good excuse to excuse your incompetence." The handsome young man threw a mischievous gaze at the fourth-year beauty, making the latter stiffen. Cedric, who was standing behind their team leader, couldn't help but frown after hearing Ethan's subtle jab by calling them incompetent. "Yes," Clara nodded after regaining her composure. "We are indeed not as competent as you, Mr. Gremory. I'm sure you can teach us a thing or two about the proper way of capturing magical beasts." Sebastian and Ethan's other half couldn't help, but praised the fourth year for taking Ethan's taunt well. They knew that this was Ethan's way of annoying the delegation of Nightfall Academy, who had come all this way in order to make things difficult for him. "Can you please answer some of our questions?" Clara asked with a smile. "I hope you don't mind." "But I do," Ethan replied. "I still have classes, so if you will excuse me." Ethan was about to walk away, but 3 wizards wearing purple robes blocked his path. These wizards were magistratus. It was obvious since they were the only ones allowed to wear purple wizard robes, making it easy for people to identify who they were. "Young man, it will be best if you cooperate with Lady Clara's investigation," one of the wizards said. "Her questioning will not take long. You can still go to your class afterward." Just as Ethan was about to give his reply, a cold tone filled with killing intent descended upon the 3 magistratus who had blocked his way. And why should he do that? Professor Barrett suddenly appeared beside Ethan and gazed at the 3 wizards with a gaze that reeked of power. "I didn't know that the magistratus of today has deteriorated to the point of becoming bullies," Professor Barrett stated. "It seems that I have to talk to the council about this. I'd hate to be associated with lowly thugs like you. Also, who is your commanding officer? I believe that you're not authorized to exercise your authority like this." The 3 magistratus paled after seeing Professor Barrett. How could they possibly not recognize him? There was a large portrait of him hanging in the common room of their headquarters, making sure that everyone recognized who he was. Barrett Ashbridge, the strongest magistratus of his era, and has gained the alias, the Executioner, due to his achievement of having killed more rogue wizards and witches than the entirety of the magistratus combined. He was a ruthless person until his retirement. Even the King of Eastshire didn't want to get on his bad side because of his powers and connections. "Tilda, you're going to get a good beating," Sir Lionel said with a happy expression on his face as he looked at his old friend who was talking to him just a second ago. Peyton scratched his head because he didn't really want any of this to happen. If not for the fact that he owed Nero a favor and that his friends were properly compensated by the headmaster, he would not have accepted this mission. "Your Excellency, I apologize for my subordinate's rudeness," Peyton said, before giving Professor Barrett a respectful bow. "We were just tasked to ensure that the talk between the delegation of Nightfall Academy and Brynhilder Academy runs smoothly. I'll talk to them and make sure that they don't do anything like this again." Professor Barrett nodded. "You don't have to apologize. I'll make sure to report to the council that you and your men have been bribed by Nero. I'm sure the Justiciars will have a field day with you guys." The smile on Peyton's lips stiffened after hearing Professor Barrett's reply. He then glared at his men for provoking someone that they shouldn't have provoked. "I knew I shouldn't have taken this mission," Peyton thought bitterly. His men were feeling the same as him and even lowered their gazes as if they were kids who had been caught by adults for doing a bad thing. Seeing that the momentum was no longer on their side, Clara decided to salvage the situation by greeting Professor Barrett. "I apologize for this, Professor," Clara said as she respectfully bowed her head. "I should have waited for Mr. Gremory to finish his classes before inviting him to have a proper talk. It was a lapse of judgment on my part, and I apologize for the inconvenience that I have caused for the both of you." Professor Barrett gazed at the fourth year and sighed. "I'm sure that you're tired after making such a long journey," Professor Barrett replied. "Come with me. I'll take all of you to your temporary residence. You can talk to Mr. Gremory, as well as the other members who went on the expedition with him after dinner." The ex-magistratus was talking in a calm manner, but it was evident that he would not allow for any objections whatsoever. Clara was certain that if any of them dared to reject his offer, he would kick them out of the academy, which was something that she didn't want to happen. "Thank you, Professor," Clara said. "We will do as you say." Professor Barrett nodded before shifting his gaze to Ethan. "Run along now and go to your other class," Professor Barrett stated. Make sure to free your schedule after dinner. It will be best to end this farce as soon as possible." "Yes, Professor," Ethan replied before shifting his gaze to Lillian. "Let's talk later, Lillian. You can join us for dinner when the time comes." "Really?" Lillian immediately brightened after getting Ethan's invitation. "Then, I'll be joining you for dinner later." Ethan nodded. "I'll see you at the Academy's dining hall." The young man then walked away without a second glance. It wasn't his idea to invite Lillian to dinner. The one who suggested this was none other than his other half, so that he could form a stronger connection with the young beauty while she was visiting the Academy. "Just relax, Ethan," Sebastian said happily inside his head. "With 2 wingmen by your side, you can't possibly fail." Ethan wanted to say a few words in reply, but decided that it was useless. Since the 2 people from the peanut gallery wanted to matchmake him and Lillian so badly, he decided to do it his way. He didn't really think of having more than 1 fiancé in his lifetime. However, things had changed. After finding out that his true background wasn't that simple, and after having the chance to face off against Lily's older brother, Kunal, he realized that he was still pathetically weak when put up against a true powerhouse. If he was already having trouble dealing with Kunal, then he was sure that facing off against Lily's father would practically be a suicide. The young man knew for certain that meeting Lily's parents was only a matter of time. If he couldn't prove himself worthy of her, then there was a chance that they would forcefully break their relationship despite their feelings for each other. "I won't let that happen," Ethan thought with a determined look in his eyes. "After going to the Oswald barony, I will devote myself to training when I return to the Academy." The young man wasn't aware that Cedric was looking intently at him from afar. He had volunteered to go to Brynhildr Academy to see Luna, but more than anything else, he wanted to challenge Ethan to another duel. As to whether Ethan would accept his challenge or not, he would only know 2 days later. After escorting the delegation of Nightfall Academy to their temporary residences, Professor Barrett left in order to have a friendly chat with the other magistratus, who were now acting as meek as children. Seeing their change, Clara knew that they had to adjust their tactics in order to deal with the students of Brynhildr Academy, who had entered the legacy domain with them. Professor Barrett had promised that, after dinner, they would get the chance to talk to Ethan and the others about things that transpired in the Deathseeker Forest. "What do you think of that mock battle earlier?" Clara asked Cedric, who seemed to be deep in thought. "I don't know what to think about it," Cedric shrugged. Throughout the battle, Ethan didn't use any magic and only relied on his martial skills to survive. "Don't you find it strange?" Clara inquired. "Of course I do," Cedric answered. "How can I not find it strange? That person defeated me in a magical duel. How come when he returns here to Brynhildr Academy, his classmates treat him like some kind of target practice?" Clara smiled because she could tell that Cedric was frustrated about seeing his rival act in that manner. There had been a few moments when she noticed that the handsome second year almost joined the mock battle out of frustration. "Why do you find it so strange?" Lillian asked in an innocent tone. "According to our reports, Sir Ethan is a dud. Him not using magic is normal, no?" Clara and Cedric looked at the young lady, who had a crush on the handsome young man since they met in Nightfall Academy. "You're hopeless," Clara said. "You're blind," Cedric stated. Lillian pouted after seeing her brother and her senior look at her with eyes filled with pity. The two were thinking along the lines of love is blind, which they had confirmed after the beautiful young lady reunited with Ethan. "What do you mean I'm blind?" Lillian puffed her cheeks. "Our information about Sir Ethan couldn't be wrong. He is a dud. I don't know how he was able to use magic when the 2 of you dueled, but this kind of information cannot be forged." Cedric wanted to refute his sister's words, but in the end, he was unable to say anything. It was indeed stated in Ethan's personal information that he was a dud. However, he refused to acknowledge this fact. If he was really defeated by a dud, then his reputation would take a nosedive once this information became widespread to the public. "So that's it," Clara pondered. Perhaps he cannot use magic unless certain conditions are met. This is also something that has been bugging me since I saw his personal information. Cedric frowned. Can this be considered his weakness? If we manage to find out his secret, then we can use it as a bargaining tool to get some information from him. It will be risky, but it's worth a try, Clara nodded. We just need someone to extract this information from him. Immediately, the two glanced at Lillian, which made the young lady frown. I'm not doing it, Lillian stated. I don't want Sir Ethan to hate me. Lillian. No means no, brother. I will not do it. If Luna finds out about this, she will definitely hate you too. Out of anger, the young lady stomped her way out of the room, leaving Clara and Cedric behind. Ethan was not resisting her advances on him, which meant that there was a possibility of her forming a good relationship with him. He even invited her to have dinner with him in a few hours, which was something that Lillian was looking forward to. She would not risk her chance to end up on his bad side just because her brother insisted on it. Cedric was also at a loss after hearing Lillian's parting words. If Luna did hate him for trying to pry into Ethan's secrets, his chance of closing the gap between them would be in danger as well. I hope they hurry up and get in touch with Luna's parents. Cedric thought of his own parents, whom he had sent a letter to a week ago. He believed that if his family were to seriously make a move, the Oswald barony would definitely agree to make Cedric Luna's fiancé and become their future son-in-law. Who could possibly reject his family's offer? If someone wanted to rise in the nobility, allying themselves with Cedric's family would definitely be the best choice. Clara, who didn't know what Cedric was thinking, sighed. We just need to wait a few hours, Clara thought. By then, everything will be settled. She had been given an artifact by the headmaster of Nightfall Academy that could detect lies. With this in her arsenal, she would be able to know the truth of whether Ethan truly captured the ancient Wendigo or not. Since this was the case, she decided to just wait till evening and no longer provoke the students of Brynhildr Academy. They weren't on their home turf, so a bit of caution was necessary. Several hours later, Ethan had just finished his last class and was about to return to Dud Manor when he noticed Lillian standing several meters away from him with a smile on her face. Clearly, the young lady was waiting for the end of his classes so that she could talk to him. He didn't share this particular class with his girlfriends, so there was no one to stop Lillian from approaching him to talk. Sir Ethan, are you done with all of your classes? Lillian asked as soon as Ethan approached her. I am, Ethan replied. Have you been waiting here for a long time? Lillian shook her head. I came here after visiting Brynhildr Academy's library. Although it isn't as big as the one we have in Nightfall Academy, their collection of books is quite surprising. Ethan pondered for a bit before deciding to ask the young lady something. Lillian, would you mind coming with me for a bit? Ethan asked. There is something that I'd like to test, and I need your help. Of course, Lillian replied happily. As long as it is within my ability, I will definitely help Sir Ethan without fail. Deep inside Ethan's sea of consciousness, Sebastian chuckled. This girl is hopeless, Sebastian stated. She's like an open book. Ethan can easily take advantage of her if he wants. She's blind, Ethan's other half commented. Just like everyone else who has fallen in love for the first time. Oh, my Tilda, are you speaking from experience? No, I am speaking about other people's experiences. Ethan ignored the two no-good people from the peanut gallery and summoned his wind dancer. He then asked Lillian to follow him. Ethan wanted to test the young lady's control over the water element, and there was no better venue to do it than at the lake not far from Brynhildr Academy. Am I doing it right, Sir Ethan? Lillian asked with uncertainty as she summoned a water dragon using the water of the lake. She had done it so naturally. Ethan had to admit that Lillian's control over the water element on land was a few times smoother than his own. You're doing well, Ethan replied. Now just focus on controlling that water dragon. Lillian nodded, understood. Seeing that the perfect chance had presented itself, Ethan started to forcefully control the water dragon under Lillian's control. Since the dragon was made up of the water of the lake and didn't come from Lillian's own magical power, Ethan thought that he could manipulate it according to his wishes. But to his surprise, he was unable to make a connection with the dragon in front of him. It was as if there was some kind of barrier that prevented his ability to manipulate the water, even when he was holding the sea god's trident. "I already told you that on land, Lillian is superior to you in every way," Sebastian stated. "The rivers and lakes are under her command, so even if you can control water, as long as she is around, you will ultimately fail to use them as your source of power. She has already awakened her legacy, but it is still incomplete," Ethan's other half commented. "If she is already this powerful with an incomplete legacy, just think about how powerful she will become once she and Ethan become partners. It's basically cheating." Sebastian nodded his head in agreement. The two watched as Ethan tried to wrestle Lillian's control over the water dragon, but each of his attempts failed completely. In the end, Ethan sighed and signaled for Lillian to stop controlling the water dragon, causing the water to spill back into the lake. "Lillian, I will try to create a water dragon as well," Ethan stated. "Once I'm done, I want you to try your best to take control of it." Lillian nodded. "Understood, Sir Ethan." Focusing his concentration on the lake water, Ethan willed it to obey his command. Slowly but surely, the water rose and formed a water dragon 5 times smaller than the one that Lillian created. Lillian was quite amused by the small dragon in front of her. She didn't look down on Ethan. In fact, she was quite impressed that he was able to do something like this despite the fact that he was a dud. Ethan, who had finished forming the dragon, took a deep breath and gave Lillian the signal. The young lady then waved her wand and pointed it at the water dragon. Immediately, Ethan felt that he had lost connection with the dragon that he created. As if to confirm his suspicion, the water dragon circled around Lillian before hovering above her head like a protector beast that was ready to pounce on anyone who threatened its master. Ethan then tried to forcefully retake his control over his creation, but it didn't have any effect. "I see, so that's how it works," Ethan thought. "As long as I'm using the water of rivers and lakes, Lillian can easily control them even if I were the one who conjured them. She is definitely a fearsome enemy on land." The young man then looked at the beautiful girl in front of him and smiled. "You are amazing, Lillian," Ethan praised. "I'm sure you'll become a famous witch in the future." Lillian blushed after hearing Ethan's praise. For some reason, hearing him compliment her made her heart beat wildly inside her chest. Truth be told, after awakening her legacy, she instantly understood that Ethan was the reason why it happened. Her strong feelings for him resonated with the Tide Bringer's legacy, allowing her own legacy to awaken. Because of this, Lillian believed that the two of them were a perfect match and were meant to be with each other. Illumina had already explained to Ethan that rejecting Lillian, and in turn, also her powers, would severely limit both of their growths. Of course, if Lillian found someone who had a similar legacy to Ethan, like the Oceanus legacy, then as long as her feelings for that person were stronger than her feelings for Ethan, her legacy would fully awaken once the newcomer and she became one. "Lillian, I have an honest question," Ethan said as he stood in front of the young lady, who was younger than him by a few months. "Do you like me?" Lillian's face, which was already red, became a shade redder after hearing Ethan's question. I do," Lillian replied in a volume that was similar to the buzzing of a mosquito. Even so, that was more than enough for Ethan to hear her answer. "Then what do you like about me?" Ethan inquired. If he were to really consider making Lillian one of his lovers, he wanted to know what she really thought about him. Unlike his other lovers, Ethan didn't have any romantic feelings for Lillian. However, the same could also be said for his other lovers. He didn't have any romantic interest in them at the beginning, with the exception of Chloe, whom he had known since childhood. These feelings they shared were slowly nurtured by time, so he believed that the more he got to know Lillian, the closer the two of them would become. although he had to admit that his reason for taking the initiative to get close to her was due to something selfish, like allowing his legacy to reach its full potential. He didn't plan to use her as a tool to get what he wanted. Unlike his other half, who would use any means necessary to reach his goals, Ethan didn't like treating people as tools. This way of thinking might be naive when compared to those who sought power with every fiber of their being, but he believed that he didn't need to choose that path in order to reach the apex of the world. "Sir Ethan, I like everything about you," Lillian replied. "You are good-looking, powerful, and care very much for your lover. I saw how you tried to protect Luna in the Deathseeker forest, and I felt very envious and jealous of her. Sometimes, I think that, if you had enrolled in Nightfall Academy instead of Brynhildr Academy, I would have definitely been your first choice." Ethan smiled bitterly after hearing Lillian's reply. He knew that if he had arrived at Nightfall Academy by mistake, instead of Brynhildr Academy, things would have ended differently. He would have never awakened his powers, because there wasn't anyone there with moon magic. Although Ethan didn't know that the reason the appraisal stone had reacted when he placed his hand over it was due to the black bracelet that was given to him by the lady who was selling snacks, he had a feeling that he narrowly escaped a punishment that would render him without his memories intact. That would have been his fate if he had gone to Nightfall Academy instead of Brynhildr Academy, and he was very certain of it. He wouldn't have been Lillian's first choice, and he would already be lucky enough if he could stay in Nightfall Academy, where duds weren't accepted among their ranks. Of course, he didn't say any of these things to Lillian, because this was one of the secrets he kept inside his heart. "Thank you for telling me the truth, Lillian." Ethan reached out for a handshake. "I know that we didn't start on the right foot, but how about we start being good friends for now? As to whether our relationship will grow from there, let us both work hard to achieve it, okay?" Lillian felt like laughing and crying at the same time as she held onto Ethan's hand. She had been feeling very guilty due to what had happened during their time in Nightfall Academy, when she invited them for dinner with the intention of letting her brother, Cedric, steal Luna away from him. This plan of hers didn't go well, and because of it, she had earned the animosity of the handsome young man who had managed to awaken the sleeping legacy inside her body. "Don't cry, okay?" Ethan said as he wiped away the tears that had started to stain Lillian's beautiful face. "I don't want your brother to think that I'm bullying you or anything." Lillian nodded as she allowed Ethan to wipe away her tears. It was at that moment that she knew with every fiber of her being that she wanted to be with him for the rest of her life, despite only knowing him for a short period of time. Around dinner time, everyone at the dining table reserved for the members of Dud Manor was looking at the guest who was seated beside Ethan with varying expressions on their faces. This guest was none other than Lillian, who looked like the happiest girl in the world as she chatted with Ethan. Even Chloe couldn't bear to shatter the sweet smile on the face of the blonde young lady, who was offering the cherry on her cake to the handsome young man beside her. With a rare blush on his cheeks, Ethan bit into it, which made Chloe, Luna, and Nicole, who were also sitting at the Dud table, wish they had recorded this scene so that they could use it to tease the handsome young man in the future. Cedric, who was watching this scene from the guest table, covered his face in embarrassment. If he had any misconception that his sister didn't have strong feelings for Ethan, these actions of hers confirmed that she really did have feelings for him. Clara, on the other hand, was mildly amused by this scene. She had known Lillian even before she enrolled in Nightfall Academy, so she knew how high the latter's standards were when it came to a life partner. She had many suitors, all of whom were handsome and born from powerful, high-ranking noble families. But she didn't even consider them to be worthy of her, and always gave them the cold shoulder. Now, that same person was blushing like a little girl in love, as she fed the young man whom they were suspecting of having captured the ancient Wendigo inside the Legacy domain. But there was one more person who was looking at this scene in disbelief. It was none other than Langston Care. As a high-ranking member of the nobility, he knew who Lillian was. His father was one of the many nobles who were pushing their sons to become Lillian's fiancé. However, All of their attempts hadn't borne fruit, for Lillian rejected their proposals. Langston had no romantic feelings for Lillian and didn't care about who she would decide to marry. But seeing her act this way made him want to reconsider his future plans of making Ethan's life a living hell. If he happened to make an enemy of Lillian, his already strained relationship with his father might reach a breaking point. Once that happened, there was a high chance that he would be disowned and kicked out of their residence. Just how did this happen? Langston clenched his fist under the table. Is that guy born with all the luck in the world? Since everyone was paying close attention to the Dud Manor table, only a handful were able to see Langston's reaction. One of them was Emma, who sneered at the teenage boy in her heart. As someone who was also part of Schwartz Manor, she was well aware of Langston's hatred toward her master. Because of this, she formed a close relationship with Langston's inner circle, allowing her to gather information about his future plans to make Ethan suffer. Of course, she had already laid the groundwork in order to thwart these plans. However, seeing how shocked he was at seeing Lillian's closeness to Ethan, she couldn't help but smile. Emma was aware of the power that was dormant in the young lady's body. Because of this, she wanted Lillian to become one of her master's lovers, allowing him to gain the power to fight to his peak condition, wherever he may be. Also, she was looking forward to meeting Ethan later tonight. Her master had asked Lilith to pass a message to her, telling her to meet him at the treehouse before midnight. The black cat added that Ethan was planning to give her something, which made the beautiful young lady's heart skip a beat. I wonder what master will give me later, Emma thought as she drank her fruit juice. While Emma was deep in her thoughts, Professor Reinhardt and Professor Barrett gave a knowing glance at each other. They were quite amused by this sudden turn of events and communicated with each other telepathically. It seems that the ancient Wendigo wasn't the only thing that Ethan stole when he went to Nightfall Academy, Professor Reinhardt said with a smile. Indeed, Professor Barrett replied. This boy is more capable than we give him credit for. Perhaps you should pull some strings. You know what I mean, right? Nero will cough out blood if that happens. The more he suffers, the better. Does he think that we will take things lying down? This will teach him not to mess with us. The two professors chuckled in their hearts as they looked at Ethan and Lillian from the staff's table. An hour later, all the members who had gone to Nightfall Academy for the expedition were gathered in the northern tower of the academy. The 4 members of Nightfall Academy and the magistratus that came with them stood together. Clara, who was the leader of the expedition, scanned the faces of the students of Brynhilder Academy. After seeing that the mage slayer, Henry, wasn't present, a frown appeared on her face. Truth be told, aside from Ethan, Henry was the second most suspicious member of the group who had fought against the ancient Wendigo. Due to his status at Brynhilder Academy, there was a very high chance that he also had the means to capture the ancient Wendigo, if he was being supported by Professor Reinhardt and Professor Barrett. For the time being, she pushed these thoughts to the back of her mind and waited for Professor Reinhardt to start the discussion. I'm sorry for gathering you here late at night, Professor Reinhardt said. Our guests from Nightfall Academy have come to ask every one of you a few questions. Of course, if these questions are too private, you have the option to not answer them. But if possible, I'd like all of you to cooperate with their interrogation. Professor Reinhardt said the last word in a teasing tone, but this was enough to make Clara blush. While what the headmaster of Brynhilder Academy said was the truth, she didn't want it to be spoken aloud in the open. Taking a deep breath, she took a step forward and greeted the students in front of her. I'm sorry if our visit has caused all of you discomfort, but we want to address an issue that is troubling our academy, Clara said in a polite and respectful manner. After searching the legacy domain, we have every reason to believe that our target, the ancient Wendigo, is no longer there. The members of the expedition team, except those who fought against the ancient Wendigo, all looked visibly confused as to why Clara was saying something like this. The only ones who remained calm were the people who were present at the scene, which included Ethan, Luna, Nicole, Garnet, and Rowan. According to our assessment, it is highly probable that the members of Brynhildr Academy have captured our target, Clara explained. We are here today to confirm whether this is true or not. Her gaze then shifted to Ethan, who was looking back at her with a calm expression on his face. Mr. Gremory, did you perhaps capture the ancient Wendigo that was supposed to become one of the guardian beasts of Nightfall Academy? Clara asked. Everyone's surprised gazes then landed on the handsome young man, who seemed to be unbothered by Clara's inquiry. Clara was wearing a magical ring that would let her know whether a person was lying or not. This was a unique artifact that was given to her by the headmaster of Nightfall Academy, Nero, to help with her interrogation. If she felt the slightest itch on her finger, it meant that the person she was talking to was lying. If she didn't feel anything, it meant that the person was telling the truth. Aside from this ring, she was also taught by her family to read the body language of a person. Even if the ring were to register that Ethan wasn't lying, as long as she was able to detect the faintest signs of a lie, her suspicion would remain. Yeah, I captured the ancient Wendigo, Ethan replied with a smirk. I mean, capturing such a weak monster was very easy to do. I could have done it with my eyes closed. His words were heavily laced with sarcasm, which made Professor Reinhardt and Professor Barrett look at each other in surprise. They were planning to step in once Clara was to ask Ethan a question, but before they could do that, Ethan had already answered, leaving the two of them at a loss for words. Clara, who was paying close attention to Ethan, felt an itch on her ring finger, which meant that Ethan was lying. She also didn't see any changes in his posture, eye contact, and words. In fact, she sensed a different kind of feeling that was coming from the handsome young man. It was none other than ridicule and disdain. These two feelings made Clara feel uncomfortable, especially when she saw the way Ethan looked at her. The young man's gaze made her feel as if she was a helpless young maiden who was being played with in the palm of his hand. She didn't expect to have this kind of reaction, especially not from someone who was younger than her. When your team fought against the ancient Wendigo, it received serious injuries, forcing it to conjure a blizzard, Clara stated. Do you think it escaped? If yes, then where do you think it went? It didn't escape, Ethan answered. I caught it. Once again, she felt her ring finger itching, making Clara frown. Her two attempts to test whether Ethan was lying or not weren't working. Perhaps, feeling a little angry, Clara decided to throw a random question to change the flow of momentum. Do you like Lillian? Clara asked. Like, Ethan snorted. I love her. This time, her ring finger didn't itch, leaving Clara at a loss for words. She was hoping to create a rift between Lillian and the handsome young man by asking this question. Clara thought that Ethan would say no, which would definitely make the young lady sad. But she believed that this was a necessary evil to prevent her junior from being led astray by the man whom she had developed a crush on. Actually, it was not only Clara who was using an artifact to detect lies from a person. Cedric and Lillian had similar artifacts with them, and they were paying close attention to Ethan's answer. When Lillian confirmed that Ethan wasn't lying, her face became beet red, and her heart started to beat wildly inside her chest. Why you love Lillian? Clara stuttered. How much do you love her? I love her so much that I can't wait for her to, you know. Ethan said the last words with a devilish smile on his face, making Lillian's face turn a shade redder. Sebastian, who was inside Ethan's sea of consciousness, laughed out loud as he patted the young man beside him, who was covering his face with both hands. Your other half is quite a smooth talker, Sebastian said in a teasing tone. I almost pity you for having to deal with the aftermath. The real Ethan didn't even bother replying and simply groaned in embarrassment because his other half was destroying his image. The original plan was to allow Professor Reinhardt and Professor Barrett to tell the delegation from Nightfall Academy that Ethan didn't need to capture the ancient Wendigo because he already had his own ancient Wendigo. By showing it to everyone, It would clear all suspicion and bring this matter to a close. However, his other half didn't agree to this. His reasoning was simple, and that was Luna. The angelic beauty had seen the ancient Wendigo, so when it was her turn to be asked a question, she wouldn't be able to lie. Because of this, his other half was putting up an act in order to pull everyone's attention to him. Also, the fewer people who knew that he had an ancient Wendigo, the better. Dance Life was a trump card that must not be seen by anyone that he didn't trust. It would greatly limit the ancient Wendigo's effectiveness in the future, especially if their opponents knew they had a strong monster at their beck and call. There was also another reason. If people knew that Ethan had an ancient Wendigo, there would be certain individuals who would want to steal it from him. Right now, he could barely fight against people at Kanal's level. If several people of the same caliber appeared, his chances of surviving were low. Ethan's other half didn't mind if their enemies sent 1 or 2 assassins to deal with Ethan. The ancient Wendigo was more than enough to deal with them. What he was afraid of was that multiple assassins would target him at once, nipping him in the bud before he could grow to his fullest potential. "Do you have any more questions?" Ethan asked in a teasing tone. "And no," Clara replied. "I do not have any more questions." "Good," Ethan nodded. "It's getting late, so I'll excuse myself." Without even waiting for a reply, Ethan walked away and grabbed Luna's hand. He didn't intend to let the angelic beauty get questioned. Clara and Cedric didn't stop him from taking away Luna. The reason? She was the person whom they least suspected to have captured the ancient Wendigo. Cedric and Lillian had explained in detail how horrified Luna was of the ancient Wendigo. The monster had almost succeeded in devouring her as well, so she was at the very bottom of the list of the students whom they wanted to interrogate. However, to ensure that they wouldn't even bother to question her, Ethan's other half had already taken her away from the scene. In order to make sure that the angelic beauty wouldn't slip up, Ethan's other half even told Luna that he intended to use a bit of his powers to make sure that the lie-detecting artifacts would not trigger when hearing her answer. This was a fail-safe precaution to help the honest young lady to lie in order, to prevent the delegation of Nightfall Academy from becoming suspicious of her lover. "No need to thank me, Ethan," Ethan's other half said in a friendly tone. "I paved the path for you so you can directly hook up with Lillian. Don't worry, buddy. This big bro has your back." Sebastian only chuckled, amused by Ethan's deadpan expression as he walked towards the back of the library. After escorting Luna back to Dud Manor, he went straight to the secret treehouse, where Emma was waiting for him. Since he had already been given access to the tree, all he needed to do was knock on it twice for a door to appear. As soon as he entered the room, he found a seductive young lady with long black hair and brown eyes, wearing a one-piece night dress that highlighted the curves of her body. Shameless. Lilith jumped out of Ethan's shadow and glared at the assistant librarian, who had pulled all the stops to seduce her master. "What do you mean shameless?" Emma asked in an innocent tone. "It's already late at night. And I'm just waiting for Master to arrive before I sleep. How am I shameless?" "HMPH, only bobbies will believe that crap," Lilith scoffed. "Master, this girl is up to no good. I can see it in her eyes." Emma arched an eyebrow and crossed her arms over her chest, striking a seductive pose. "I am Master's promised one," Emma stated. "How can I possibly hurt Master? Please, your jealousy is misplaced. If you work with me to pin down Master tonight, you can become one of his concubines, you know." Lilith gave Ethan a sidelong glance before lowering her head. For a brief moment, she considered accepting Emma's proposal in order to get close to her master. "See, Master, the one you should be worried about is this thieving cat." Emma shook her head helplessly. "I just goaded her a bit and she almost accepted my proposal. She can't be trusted." "Why you? Stop talking nonsense." Lilith lunged towards Emma with the intention of giving her a piece of her mind. However, Ethan managed to grab the back of her neck in midair, holding her in place. "Okay, let's stop here," Ethan replied. He then walked towards the couch to take a seat and placed Lilith on his lap, stroking her fur. This black cat immediately started purring after getting her master's attention. Tusk! Emma clicked her tongue after seeing the shameless cat enjoy their master's petting. Not wanting to lose, she sat beside Ethan and looked at him with an inquiring gaze. Master, you said that you have something to give me, Emma asked. Ethan nodded. Give me your hand. His promised one obeyed and placed her right hand on the palm of Ethan's hand. A moment later, the snake armlet on Ethan's forearm slithered onto Emma's hand, coiling on her forearm before transforming into a black golden snake armlet. This is the giant black snake that we beat in the Legacy domain, Ethan said. You lack offensive and defensive abilities, so I'm giving him to you to serve as your protector. If you need its help, just call its name Nura. Nura, Emma muttered as she looked at the snake armlet in her hand. This was the first gift she had received from Ethan, and it made her heart feel warm with joy. I'll treasure it, Master, Emma stated. Thank you for the gift. Lilith already had a feeling that Ethan was going to give the snake armlet to Emma, so she wasn't too surprised. Although she was envious, she didn't let it show in her face. In fact, as long as she was allowed to be in Ethan's shadow, she was already very happy. Being by his side was more than enough. Master, actually I need a favor, Emma said softly. Yes. Ethan looked at the seductive young lady who was making his heart beat wildly inside his chest. He didn't understand why this was happening, but for some reason, his body was reacting to her. In fact, a glowing purple runic emblem that meant soul appeared on the back of Ethan's right hand. At the same time, the rune that was on Emma's chest glowed as well, making it visible through her black night dress. Master, I need you to sleep beside me tonight, Emma replied. Don't worry, I won't do anything. I just need to recharge my connection with you. This will also unlock some of the sealed abilities of the runes that we share, allowing us to communicate over great distances through telepathy. Before Ethan could even reply, Ethan's other half made a comment inside his consciousness. Ethan, you have been ignoring your responsibilities to your promised one, Ethan's other half commented. You still don't understand this at the moment, but when you finish your coming-of-age trial, you will realize how important she is in your life. In fact, your souls are tied together, and if you die, she will die as well. But the latter cannot be said for her. If she dies alone. As her master, while you will not be affected by her death, your death will spell the end of her. Treat her better, okay? This girl, despite being a schemer, is holding herself back for you. This proves how much she likes and trusts you. For the men and women of the 4 Protector clans, it is their greatest honor to be chosen as your promised one. Ethan already understood that his relationship with Emma was special. Unlike Chloe, Luna, and Lily, whom he truly loved, Emma played a more supporting role, similar to a background character. She didn't like to be in the limelight and simply made sure that Ethan shone. Like a shadow that only appeared under the light, her role was to always be the wind beneath his wings. Okay, Ethan replied. I'll stay with you tonight. Lilith, you can rest in one of the bedrooms for tonight. Lilith sighed and nodded her head. As one of the members of the Protector clans, she understood that this was an important part of their duty. After getting Ethan's approval, Emma smiled, and her smile made his heart skip a beat. The seductive beauty then held Ethan's hand and led him towards the stairs, where the master bedroom was located. There was a faint flush on her cheeks, but since she was in front of him, he didn't see it right away. As soon as the door was closed, Emma dutifully removed Ethan's robes and brought him to the bed. She then turned off the lantern beside the bed, leaving only the light of the moonlight to illuminate the room. Emma then pulled the strings of her nightdress, making it drop beside her feet. After that, she climbed the bed and laid beside Ethan, hugging him close. The young man didn't resist and allowed Emma to do what she wanted. This act of skinship made the runes on their bodies glow brighter. Perhaps, feeling how serious she was, Ethan also wrapped his arms around her body and planted a kiss on Emma's forehead. Good night, Emma. Good night, Ethan. Instead of calling him master, the young lady felt that it was more appropriate to call him by his name. With feelings of warmth and happiness embracing her body, Emma slept like a baby throughout the night and felt refreshed when she opened her eyes the next day. When Ethan woke up the next day, Emma was no longer beside him. To his surprise, his body felt so refreshed, as if he had slept for 12 straight hours. He no longer felt any soreness or aches, which had been plaguing him ever since he fought against the water dragons created by Sebastian for training. "Feels good, right?" Ethan's other half said in a teasing tone. "You're missing a lot, my boy. Now that your body is in peak condition, let's go out and hook up with Lillian. Trust me, she won't even resist." Ethan ignored his other half's suggestion and got out of bed. He tidied it up a bit before pulling on his robes. A glance at the clock on the wall told him that it was only 6 in the morning. Their classes wouldn't start until 8, so he still had plenty of time to have breakfast and take a quick shower before attending his morning classes. The moment he left the master bedroom, he caught the scent of freshly cooked food in the air. When he descended the stairs, he immediately saw a humming Emma placing plates filled with food on the dining table. Clearly, she was in a very good mood, and there was even a faint smile on her face. Lilith was also there, sitting on top of the table. She was looking at Emma with a knowing stare, understanding why she was in a good mood today. "Good morning," Ethan greeted the two with a smile. "Good morning, Master," Emma, who stopped humming, replied with a smile. "Good morning, Master," Lilith greeted. "It seems that you had a good sleep last night." Ethan nodded. "I did." The handsome young man then glanced at Emma, making the latter blush. This sudden change in her expression made the black cat sitting on top of the table shake her head helplessly. "If only I had found Master first, then I would be the one in her place," Lilith thought. "If only I knew, I wouldn't have objected to my mother's decision to enroll me here." Just like Emma, Lilith was supposed to be sent to Brynhildr Academy. However, she rejected it and chose to look for Ethan on her own. Unfortunately, her method didn't work, which was now causing her a great deal of regret. "Well, it doesn't matter," Lilith eyed the two teenagers. "I don't need to be Master's promised one to be close to him." After reaffirming her resolve, the black cat started to eat the moment Ethan started eating. Their breakfast was actually quite simple. Toast, bacon, and eggs, but for some reason, it tasted better than usual, making Ethan eat a lot. After that, Emma poured him some coffee before wiping his lips with a napkin. This movement was so natural that it almost made Lilith vomit sugar then and there. "Master, I have already sent a report back to the Meredith clan about your encounter with Lily's family," Emma said. "For now, I didn't ask them for reinforcements. I simply informed them of the situation. I hope you don't mind." "I don't mind," Ethan replied before taking a sip of his coffee. When he was done, he placed the cup on top of the table and glanced at his promised one. "Have you seen any visions lately?" Emma hesitated for a bit before speaking out her mind. "I'm not sure if this is a vision, but last night I saw a dream," Emma replied. "I dreamed of a round table surrounded by runes with each one representing an animal." Emma closed her eyes as if trying to recall every detail of her dream, making sure that she didn't miss anything. "Stag, bull, cat, raven, salmon, horse, eagle, wolf, dragon, butterfly, boar, fox, and bear," Emma listed. At the center of the table was a symbol of a serpent that was eating its own tail. There was also someone chanting in the background. Emma then began to recite the chant that she heard in her dream. Her memory was very strong to the point that she could recall things clearly, similar to someone who had an eidetic memory. "In shadows deep, where mysteries entwine. A serpent's dance, a circle divine. Ouroboros, eternal in coils so tight. A tale of beginnings, an endless night. With scales that shimmer, a warm embrace. Swirling eternity, a timeless grace. Biting its tail, in a graceful ballet. A symbol profound, in night and day. From ancient realms to the present's hold. Ouroboros whispers, secrets unfold. A serpent's wisdom, in cycles spun. The dance of life beneath the sun. Emma opened her eyes as she said the last verse, looking at Ethan as if she was in a trance. In Mimir's stream, where wisdom gleams, the salmon leaps through ancient dreams. Ethan's hand shook a bit as he held the handle of his cup. Although Emma didn't know the meaning of her dream, it was clear to him that what she saw had a connection with the Order of Ouroboros, an order in which Fortis Dud was once a member. Now, Ethan was part of this secret society, and he was one of the animals depicted in the chant. Even now, he still didn't know the purpose of this organization, because he was waiting for Fortis Dud to explain things to him. The last thing that he told him was that they would talk again when he returned to the academy. However, the founder of Dud Manor had yet to make any effort to make contact with him. I hope he talks to me soon, Ethan thought. I have a lot of questions to ask him. Ethan's reaction didn't escape Emma's and Lilith's gaze. Although they were curious about it, they decided to not say anything. If it were really important, their master would tell them about it. Since Ethan didn't say anything, it meant that it was something that he didn't want them to know, or he still didn't fully understand it himself. The handsome young man wanted to share the information he knew to his protectors, but he put that on hold for the time being. He wanted to talk to Fortis Dud first and confirm whether he was allowed to mention anything about the Order of Ouroboros to those who were not part of their secret organization. Ethan Gremory, I challenge you to a duel. As soon as those words sounded, everyone who heard it looked at the handsome second year with blonde hair and blue eyes. Ethan couldn't help but admire Cedric's tenacity to challenge him over and over again. He first challenged him a day ago, but Ethan declined. This morning, he challenged him again, but Ethan once again declined. Both challenges were requested in private when it was only the two of them, and Ethan rejected them both. But now, in front of everyone in the grand dining hall of Brynhildr Academy, Cedric challenged Ethan a third time. This time, he challenged him in front of many people, including the staff of the academy, with the intention of letting everyone know his intention of dueling him. Cedric knew that Ethan might still reject his challenge, but if the latter were to do that, many would think that he wasn't upholding the honor of Brynhildr Academy. There were unwritten rivalries between the different magical academies in the Shire continent. For them, challenging each other was the norm, and it was considered as a way to test which academy was better when it came to teaching their students. The young man knew that rejecting Cedric in front of this many people would have consequences, and to be honest, the teenage boy's persistence annoyed him more than just a little bit. A tense silence descended upon the dining hall, and after a while, Ethan finally nodded his head. Very well, Ethan replied. Tomorrow afternoon at exactly 2 o'clock, I'll be waiting for you in the arena. Ethan's answer elicited the cheers of his fellow students and nods of approval from the staff. For the professors of the academy, it didn't matter whether Ethan won or not. The only thing that mattered was that he accepted the challenge because Nightfall Academy was one of the academies that they treated as a rival. Both academies had a very long history, and most students either had Nightfall Academy or Brynhildr Academy as their first choice. Because of this, whenever the two met at special events or gatherings, a duel between the two was inevitable. Cedric, who finally got what he wanted, thanked Ethan for accepting his challenge and returned to his seat at the table that was assigned for them. Lillian, who was seated beside Ethan, simultaneously looked at her crush and her brother with a conflicted expression on her face. Sensing her worries, the handsome young man smiled at her and shook his head. Don't worry, it's not a big deal, Ethan said. Just be careful, okay? Lillian said in a volume that only Ethan could hear. Brother has been training extremely hard since you left the academy. Ethan nodded. I'll keep that in mind. After dinner, Ethan returned to Dud Manor and sat on top of his bed. Before he accepted Cedric's challenge, Sebastian talked to him. Agree to his request, Sebastian stated. but choose to duel him tomorrow at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Now that he was alone in his room, the guardian of the city of Zentris talked to him in a calm manner. "When you duel him tomorrow, don't use any magic," Sebastian replied. "It will be part of your training." "Huh," Ethan frowned. "If I don't fight him using magic, how will I win?" "It seems that I didn't make myself clear enough," Sebastian stated. "You will not be allowed to use your core magic tomorrow. You are only allowed to rely on the power of your Tidebringer legacy. Aside from that, you're not allowed to use anything else." "You mean, I will use your power tomorrow and create water using the gem on the sea god's trident?" "Huh, who told you that I would allow you to use my power tomorrow? You will just fight him using the sea god's trident and your legacy powers without me." Ethan scratched his head. "Aren't you part of my legacy?" "I am," Sebastian replied. "But I will not help you tomorrow. You will understand when the time comes. I'll just say this. Tomorrow is a good opportunity for you to better understand what your legacy can do if certain conditions are met." Ethan no longer questioned Sebastian because he knew that no matter how much he asked him, they would just go in circles. "I guess I'll just find out about it tomorrow," Ethan thought. He knew that Sebastian and his other half might put him in a disadvantageous spot in order to train him, but they would not ask him to do the impossible. Since that was the case, he would just give it his best like he always did. "After Cedric's duel with Ethan, we will return to the academy the next day," Clara stated. "We have already accomplished what we came for. I've also used the special artifact that would allow me to detect the presence of the ancient Wendigo in the academy, but my search didn't yield any results." "Is that the reason why you've been touring the academy as of late, Lady Clara?" Cedric asked. "That's a brilliant plan." "Not brilliant enough since I didn't find any clues during my strolls," Clara answered. "Lillian, we should have returned to the academy today. But since your brother asked me to stay for another day to challenge Ethan, I will also give you one more day to say your goodbyes to him. Make it count, and if possible, poach him from Brynhildr Academy. He will be a good addition to our roster." Cedric frowned after hearing Clara's strategy. Although he didn't approve of his sister being with Ethan, if that would help break the handsome young man's relationship with Luna, then he would reluctantly support his sister. Since the two of them were serious in their desire to make the two teenagers from Brynhildr Academy their lovers, Cedric was willing to join this plan. What he didn't know was that his sister had already partially succeeded in having a relationship with Ethan. Lillian's legacy and his legacy were a match made in heaven. Not being together would just limit both of their potential and be a waste of their talents. Also, even if she didn't know about it, she had already gotten the seal of approval from Sebastian and Ethan's other half. The two were even serving as her wingmen, helping her in more ways than one. Ethan was debating whether he should go to the garden and ask the fairies for help or not. However, since Sebastian had asked him to not use any magic and rely solely on his legacy, he couldn't focus on his classes due to worry. None of the students in the academy, with the exception of those who had gone to Nightfall Academy, knew that this wasn't the first time that Ethan and Cedric would be having a duel. Chloe, Luna, and Lillian were very worried about Ethan. Lily and Nicole, on the other hand, were looking forward to it. Both of them were the competitive type, and they wanted to see the outcome of this battle. Lily wasn't too worried about Ethan this time because he wasn't fighting someone on the same level as her older brother. She believed that, as long as the gap wasn't too big, her lover would emerge victorious. This wasn't just blind trust. This was a belief that gradually formed after battling against Ethan multiple times, as well as witnessing the battles her lover fought in the lands of Alester. Of course, the ladies didn't know that the handsome young man was feeling a bit pressured because he felt stripped of his ability to fight using his full powers. Cedric was strong. There was no question about it. If not for the fact that he had acquired the help of the fairies of Nightfall Academy, he would not have won their duel back then. Lillian told him that her brother had trained exceptionally hard in order to challenge him a second time. This meant that the Cedric he would be fighting today would fight with everything he had, and the entirety of World Academy would be there to witness it. A sigh escaped Ethan's lips as he thought about the upcoming battle. It was also at this moment that a spray of water hit his face, making his classmates giggle. "Ethan, stop daydreaming in my class," Professor Enjal said in a disapproving tone. "It seems that he's still not awake. Wake him up, please." The three mischievous water sprites, who were swimming in a meter-tall transparent cauldron, started to spray water on Ethan while his classmates scattered to prevent themselves from getting wet. Lillian, who had joined the class as a temporary student, hurriedly raised her wand and gave it a wave. A moment later, the water sprays stopped a meter away from Ethan before returning to their owners, drowning them in water. But instead of being pissed, the water sprite thought that Lillian was playing with them, so they happily sprayed water in her direction as well. Soon, a battle between ones who specialized in the water elements ensued. Since the water sprites that Professor Enjal had brought in today's class lived in rivers and lakes, their water attacks were easily deflected or returned by Lillian because of her superb control over water. Ethan was quite impressed by this sudden turn of events and gained enlightenment on the spot. This battle had shown him that if two magic users fought against each other using the same element, the one with the higher proficiency over that element could overpower their opponent. The water sprites were powerful water spirits, so their control over the water element was very high. If not for the fact that Lillian had awakened a portion of her legacy, she would have lost to them in combat. It also turned out that once all four of them became serious, the battle would come to a stalemate. Professor Enjal and the students of World Academy were very impressed by Lillian's performance, even applauding her for her incredible display of magic power. This earned Ethan jealous stares from his classmates, and some even cursed at him under their breath for being a womanizer and stealing the hearts of beautiful witches who had great magical potential. "That was amazing, Ms. Raylight," Professor Enjal said as he clapped his hands. "Bravo!" Lillian smiled and gave a brief curtsy to everyone, making them applaud her more. Even the water sprites were also clapping because they had a lot of fun playing with Lillian. The lesson ended, and everyone left with smiles on their faces. "You were great back there," Ethan commented, making Lillian's smile widen. "It is all thanks to you, Sir Ethan," Lillian replied. "Because of you, I have awakened my potential." "Stop calling me sir. Close friends don't use honorifics for each other." "Thank you, Ethan." "Better." Chloe and Lily, who were walking a few steps behind the two, gave each other knowing glances. Ethan had already explained to them his relationship with Lillian and asked the two girls to not antagonize her. Lily didn't mind, because she had already told Ethan that she would allow him to have 5 wives. Chloe, on the other hand, was still having a hard time accepting the concept of polygamy. Luna was also fine with it, since it was very common practice for nobles of high standing. The only problem at the moment was that Ethan didn't have any noble titles to his name. However, whether he had a noble title or not, Luna and Lily didn't really care. They had already chosen him as their lover, and they would stick to their decision. "How confident are you in winning against my brother?" Lillian asked as she walked side by side with Ethan as they headed to Dud Manor. "Who do you want to win between us?" Ethan asked back in a teasing tone. Lillian immediately had a conflicted look on her face, as this was a very hard question for her. She had to choose between her family and the person she liked, and truth be told, she didn't want to pick someone out of the two of them. "Forget my question," Ethan said after seeing that Lillian was having a hard time giving an answer. He didn't want to make her feel troubled, so he decided to stop teasing her. "As to how confident I am in beating your brother today, I can only say that I'm not that confident. I don't want to admit it, but your brother is pretty strong, Lillian." Hearing her crush praise her brother made Lillian feel better. She no longer worried about who would win the duel between Cedric and Ethan. She just wanted to get it over with so that she would no longer have to be conflicted about which side she wanted to win. A few minutes before the scheduled time of the duel, The Grand Coliseum was packed, and all the students who didn't have any classes at that time came to watch the battle. Even the professors whose classes coincided with the duel asked their students to accompany them to the Grand Coliseum to show their support for their academy. Langston and his cronies were all looking forward to seeing Ethan lose against Cedric. He knew how powerful Cedric was, since he had once personally asked to have a friendly spar with him. Langston didn't even last half a minute against Cedric, even when he used his full power right away. This proved to show the difference in their abilities, which made him certain that Ethan had finally found his match and would soon suffer defeat in front of everyone in the academy. Faint rumbling sounds could be heard above the Colosseum as dark clouds covered the sun. Professor Reinhardt had already activated the barrier of the Grand Coliseum, shielding those who were seated at the stands from getting wet from the rain. "Such bad weather," Professor Ophelia commented. "I hope their duel finishes soon." A moment later, the sound of cheers came from the stands as Cedric walked toward the arena, equipped with his full battle regalia. Despite the dark clouds above him, he was emitting a light that made everyone glance in his direction. Truth be told, many witches in the academy had become smitten with him due to how handsome he was. So despite the fact that he was from a rival academy, he still found support among the ladies of Brynhildr Academy. "Traitors!" Chloe scoffed after seeing the hateful guy, who wished to steal her best friend from her cousin, gain the support of her schoolmates. Luna, who was seated beside her and petting Selene, could only smile after hearing her best friend's remark. A few minutes later, Ethan also appeared, which made everyone, especially the ladies, arch their eyebrows. The handsome young man, who was currently walking toward the arena, wasn't wearing any upper clothes, allowing everyone to see his deity-like physique, making Lillian's mouth hang wide open. "Well, I'll be damned," Clara commented from the side. "Now I understand why you have the hots for him. Do you think he likes someone older than him as well?" Lillian completely ignored her senior, as her entire face became beet red. The witches from Brynhildr Academy were enjoying the eye candy in front of them, with some of the bolder ones even whistling to show their appreciation. "Damn, this guy is at it again." A first-year gritted his teeth in annoyance. "Shit, if I knew he looked like that, I would have started exercising seriously a year ago." A second year clenched his fist. "Although I hate to admit it, his confidence and bearing are truly attractive. Not to mention that body. Damn, if I were a girl, I'd definitely fall for him." Why are the heavens unfair? The witches, on the other hand, also started to become rowdy. "Ethan, marry me." "I want your baby." "I'm still single." "Can I call you daddy as well?" Professor Reinhardt couldn't help but shake his head as he looked at his students who were cursing and praising Ethan at the same time. Some of the guys even started booing, showing their displeasure at his display of manliness, catching the attention of all the ladies in the academy. "This brat sure knows how to make an entrance," Professor Barrett chuckled. After seeing the dark clouds in the sky and hearing the faint rumble in the heavens, Ethan finally understood why Sebastian chose to fight at this time and even asked him to not use any magic. A storm had brewed in the skis of Brynhildr Academy, and for Ethan, who was restricted to only using his legacy, this was the perfect condition to test if he had the ability to use this opportunity to his advantage. Ethan was debating whether he should go to the garden and ask the fairies for help or not. However, since Sebastian had asked him to not use any magic and rely solely on his legacy, he couldn't focus on his classes due to worry. None of the students in the academy, with the exception of those who had gone to Nightfall Academy, knew that this wasn't the first time that Ethan and Cedric would be having a duel. Chloe, Luna, and Lillian were very worried about Ethan. Lily and Nicole, on the other hand, were looking forward to it. Both of them were the competitive type, and they wanted to see the outcome of this battle. Lily wasn't too worried about Ethan this time because he wasn't fighting someone on the same level as her older brother. She believed that, as long as the gap wasn't too big, her lover would emerge victorious. This wasn't just blind trust. This was a belief that gradually formed after battling against Ethan multiple times, as well as witnessing the battles her lover fought in the lands of Alester. Of course, the ladies didn't know that the handsome young man was feeling a bit pressured, because he felt stripped of his ability to fight using his full powers. Cedric was strong. There was no question about it. If not for the fact that he had acquired the help of the fairies of Nightfall Academy, he would not have won their duel back then. Lillian told him that her brother had trained exceptionally hard in order to challenge him a second time. This meant that the Cedric he would be fighting today would fight with everything he had, and the entirety of Brynhildr Academy would be there to witness it. A sigh escaped Ethan's lips as he thought about the upcoming battle. It was also at this moment that a spray of water hit his face, making his classmates giggle. "Ethan, stop daydreaming in my class," Professor Enjal said in a disapproving tone. "It seems that he's still not awake. Wake him up, please." The three mischievous water sprites, who were swimming in a meter-tall transparent cauldron, started to spray water on Ethan while his classmates scattered to prevent themselves from getting wet. Lillian, who had joined the class as a temporary student, hurriedly raised her wand and gave it a wave. A moment later, the water sprays stopped a meter away from Ethan before returning to their owners, drowning them in water. But instead of being pissed, the water sprite thought that Lillian was playing with them, so they happily sprayed water in her direction as well. Soon, a battle between ones who specialized in the water elements ensued. Since the water sprites that Professor Enjal had brought in today's class lived in rivers and lakes, their water attacks were easily deflected or returned by Lillian because of her superb control over water. Ethan was quite impressed by this sudden turn of events and gained enlightenment on the spot. This battle had shown him that if two magic users fought against each other using the same element, the one with the higher proficiency over that element could overpower their opponent. The water sprites were powerful water spirits, so their control over the water element was very high. If not for the fact that Lillian had awakened a portion of her legacy, she would have lost to them in combat. It also turned out that once all four of them became serious, the battle would come to a stalemate. Professor Enjal and the students of Brynhildr Academy were very impressed by Lillian's performance, even applauding her for her incredible display of magic power. This earned Ethan jealous stares from his classmates, and some even cursed him under their breath for being a womanizer and stealing the hearts of beautiful witches who had great magical potential. "That was amazing, Ms. Raylight," Professor Enjal said as he clapped his hands. "Bravo." Lillian smiled and gave a brief curtsy to everyone, making them applaud her more. Even the water sprites were also clapping because they had a lot of fun playing with Lillian. The lesson ended, and everyone left with smiles on their faces. "You were great back there," Ethan commented, making Lillian's smile widen. "It is all thanks to you, Sir Ethan," Lillian replied. "Because of you, I have awakened my potential." "Stop calling me sir. Close friends don't use honorifics for each other." "Thank you, Ethan." "Better." Chloe and Lily, who were walking a few steps behind the two, gave each other knowing glances. Ethan had already explained to them his relationship with Lillian and asked the two girls to not antagonize her. Lily didn't mind, because she had already told Ethan that she would allow him to have 5 wives. Chloe, on the other hand, was still having a hard time accepting the concept of polygamy. Luna was also fine with it, since it was very common practice for nobles of high standing. The only problem at the moment was that Ethan didn't have any noble titles to his name. However, whether he had a noble title or not, Luna and Lily didn't really care. They had already chosen him as their lover, and they would stick to their decision. "How confident are you in winning against my brother?" Lillian asked as she walked side by side with Ethan as they headed to Dud Manor. "Who do you want to win between us?" Ethan asked back in a teasing tone. Lillian immediately had a conflicted look on her face, as this was a very hard question for her. She had to choose between her family and the person she liked, and truth be told, she didn't want to pick someone out of the two of them. "Forget my question," Ethan said after seeing that Lillian was having a hard time giving an answer. He didn't want to make her feel troubled, so he decided to stop teasing her. "As to how confident I am in beating your brother today, I can only say that I'm not that confident. I don't want to admit it, but your brother is pretty strong, Lillian." Hearing her crush praise her brother made Lillian feel better. She no longer worried about who would win the duel between Cedric and Ethan. She just wanted to get it over with so that she would no longer have to be conflicted about which side she wanted to win. A few minutes before the scheduled time of the duel, the Grand Coliseum was packed, and all the students who didn't have any classes at that time came to watch the battle. Even the professors whose classes coincided with the duel asked their students to accompany them to the Grand Coliseum to show their support for their academy. Langston and his cronies were all looking forward to seeing Ethan lose against Cedric. He knew how powerful Cedric was, since he had once personally asked to have a friendly spar with him. Langston didn't even last half a minute against Cedric, even when he used his full power right away. This proved to show the difference in their abilities, which made him certain that Ethan had finally found his match and would soon suffer defeat in front of everyone in the academy. Faint rumbling sounds could be heard above the Coliseum as dark clouds covered the sun. Professor Reinhardt had already activated the barrier of the Grand Coliseum, shielding those who were seated at the stands from getting wet from the rain. "Such bad weather," Professor Ophelia commented. "I hope their duel finishes soon." A moment later, the sound of cheers came from the stands as Cedric walked toward the arena, equipped with his full battle regalia. Despite the dark clouds above him, he was emitting a light that made everyone glance in his direction. Truth be told, many witches in the academy had become smitten with him due to how handsome he was. So despite the fact that he was from a rival academy, he still found support among the ladies of Brynhildr Academy. "Traitors!" Chloe scoffed after seeing the hateful guy, who wished to steal her best friend from her cousin, gain the support of her schoolmates. Luna, who was seated beside her and petting Selene, could only smile after hearing her best friend's remark. A few minutes later, Ethan also appeared, which made everyone, especially the ladies, arch their eyebrows. The handsome young man, who was currently walking toward the arena, wasn't wearing any upper clothes, allowing everyone to see his deity-like physique, making Lillian's mouth hang wide open. "Well, I'll be damned," Clara commented from the side. "Now I understand why you have the hots for him. Do you think he likes someone older than him as well?" Lillian completely ignored her senior, as her entire face became beet red. The witches from Brynhildr Academy were enjoying the eye candy in front of them, with some of the bolder ones even whistling to show their appreciation. "Damn, this guy is at it again." A first-year gritted his teeth in annoyance. "Shit, if I knew he looked like that, I would have started exercising seriously a year ago." A second-year clenched his fist. "Although I hate to admit it, his confidence and bearing are truly attractive. Not to mention that body. Damn, if I were a girl, I'd definitely fall for him." Why are the heavens unfair? The witches, on the other hand, also started to become rowdy. "Ethan, marry me. I want your baby. I'm still single. Can I call you daddy as well?" Professor Reinhardt couldn't help but shake his head as he looked at his students who were cursing and praising Ethan at the same time. Some of the guys even started booing, showing their displeasure at his display of manliness, catching the attention of all the ladies in the academy. "This brat sure knows how to make an entrance," Professor Barrett chuckled. After seeing the dark clouds in the sky and hearing the faint rumble in the heavens, Ethan finally understood why Sebastian chose to fight at this time and even asked him to not use any magic. A storm had brewed in the skis of Brynhildr Academy, and for Ethan, who was restricted to only using his legacy, this was the perfect condition to test if he had the ability to use this opportunity to his advantage. Despite almost being blown off the arena, Ethan didn't feel any worry. In fact, he was feeling something that he had never felt for a long time. The last thing he had this feeling was when he was fighting against the necromancer in the Battle of Zentris. Back then, he was fighting almost without magic, simply relying on the power of the legacy he was using right now. Since the battlefield was near the sea, he was able to use the power of the Tide Bringer forcefully, changing the battlefield to his favor. Lillian's fight against the water sprites helped him understand that although he was using the power of the storm that was currently pouring down over the arena, his control over it wasn't as refined as he did when he summoned a thunderstorm near the sea. If it was, he wouldn't be having a hard time controlling the water dragons, making them do his bidding. The most he did was increase their speed, controlling them to ram their bodies against his opponent with the intention of testing out ways he could refine his battle style on land. His original plan was to create variations, like the dragons that Sebastian created for his training. He wanted them to have different abilities, but it was too taxing for him to do so. Because of this, he just settled for making all of them fast to at least pressure his opponent. Seeing that Cedric was preparing to unleash another barrage of light beams in his direction, Ethan raised the sea god's trident and called upon the power of the storm. "Fulmina," Ethan roared. At that moment, a dozen lightning bolts descended from the sky, creating a deafening roar and blinding radiance, forcing the students and the staff of the academy to close their eyes and cover their ears. After the lightning bolts were harnessed by the sea god's trident, Ethan pointed it at Cedric and unleashed its full might. The countless beams of light and the lightning bolts merged into one form and collided with each other. A few seconds later, a shock wave erupted midair, blowing away the two combatants. However, even before the light receded, a resounding clash of metals reverberated in the Grand Colosseum as Ethan and Cedric finally engaged each other in close combat. The handsome young man took 3 steps back, while the second year skidded several meters away after their first clash. When it came to raw strength, Ethan was still superior, but that didn't faze Cedric. Flapping his wings and increasing his speed, he rained countless sword strikes on Ethan, his blows carrying the momentum of his flight. This made his blows heavier and stronger, allowing him to compensate for the difference in strength between the two of them. The raindrops that were falling around them froze midair, turning into countless water bullets the size of a grain of rice. They then flew towards Cedric, pummeling his body repeatedly, while Ethan endured the blows that would have already sent an ordinary human flying. At first, Cedric didn't mind the attacks that were descending upon him. Although they were numerous, they didn't have that much power to threaten him. But half a minute later, the water bullets that were only as big as a grain of rice became bigger, as the raindrops merged with each other. This time, their size was the size of a golf ball. Cedric grunted after being hit dozens of times, and was forced to rise up towards the sky, using his dome of light to shield himself. He was flying so fast that half a minute later, he broke past through the clouds, letting the light of the sun fall upon his body. Canticum lucis. A golden halo of light appeared on top of Cedric's head. The number wings behind his back increased TP4 as he unlocked the 3rd level of his legacy, which was the Song of Light. A giant sword of light that was dozens of meters long hovered above him. This was his strongest attack, and he would end the battle with this one strike. "Barrett," Professor Reinhardt called out to his friend using telepathy. "I know," Professor Barrett replied. The 2 strongest wizards of Brynhildr Academy both waved their wands, reinforcing the protecting arrangements that were placed on the arena, as well as the stands where the students were seated. Ethan narrowed his eyes as he raised his hand, gathering the power of the storm around him. "Grand Arya," Ethan said with a determined look on his face. The wind and rain gathered around him, creating a miniature tornado. Countless lightning bolts descended from the heavens as if the young man was calling all of them to aid him in one last strike. Using the entirety of the storm as a source of power, Ethan held his sea god's trident that was now imbued by countless lightning bolts, snaking up his arm and throughout his entire body. Cedric, who had gathered the powers he needed to end the battle, pointed at the young man standing on top of the arena, who was thinking the same thing as him. Lex Eterna, Cedric roared as the giant sword of light descended, carrying his divine might. Triana, Ethan shouted as he, too, threw the divine weapon in his hand towards the sword that was descending from the heavens. A crisp, cracking sound that was similar to the pealing of thunder reached everyone's ears. For a brief moment, all sound from the surroundings disappeared, or at least this was what everyone thought. The truth was, the sound of the collision of the two powers were so strong that it momentarily deafened everyone. Some even felt a strong pain in their ears as their eardrums ruptured, not able to bear the weight of the two legacy spells that were trying to overpower each other. The guardian of World Academy transformed into her Valkyrie form and pointed her spear at the Grand Colosseum. "Kyrie eleison," Brynhild stated. Immediately, the entire arena was coated with a golden dome of light, including Ethan and Cedric, who had unleashed the powers that only those who held a legacy inside their bodies were able to wield. Kyrie eleison. Professor Reinhardt and Professor Barrett reinforced Brynhilder's spell. Just as their spells had covered everyone in the arena, a powerful explosion erupted in the sky, making everyone remember the day when two legacy spells detonated at the same time. Damn, is this really a duel between a wizard and a dud? Clara couldn't help but rant after she regained her sight and vision. My ears are still ringing. Lillian, who was seated beside her, had a pale expression on her face. Although they were protected from the brunt of the shock waves, the magical residue in the surroundings made her feel nauseous. She wasn't the only one feeling this way. Several students were also affected by the overload of magical power in their surroundings, causing them to feel dizzy and making their skin tingle. The students who had suffered from ruptured eardrums earlier were also in bad shape, and a handful of them even fainted. Professor Galena and the members of Terra Manor, who were part of the medical team of the infirmary, immediately went to assist those who were worst hit by the aftershocks of the clash between Lux and Cedric. Professor Reinhardt also offered his assistance to Professor Galena, while Professor Barrett teleported beside Ethan, who was kneeling on the arena with several bruises on his body. Blood seeped from the corner of his lips, and his face was very pale. However, after a quick diagnosis, Professor Barrett didn't sense any life-threatening injuries, making him sigh in relief. Suddenly, a beam of light descended from the sky and landed on the arena. Cedric, who had a disheveled appearance, was on all fours, coughing heavily. The wings behind his back shattered into countless light particles, which then dispersed completely. Blood was flowing out of his nose, and his face was as pale as a candle. Professor Barrett hurriedly rushed to his side and checked his condition. A moment later, he took out a potion from his storage ring and gave it to Cedric. "Drink this," Professor Barrett ordered. Cedric didn't hesitate and began to drink the potion that was handed to him. His head hurt terribly, a bit worse than the rest of his body. Because he was in the air, he didn't have any foothold that allowed him to brace against the impact of the shock wave. So, when the aftermath of the clash between the two powerful spells reached him, he was blown away helplessly. Ethan fared a bit better since he was far away from the point of impact. Although the shock waves did hit him, the body enhanced by the power of the Tidebringer was robust enough to endure the impact. So, between him and Cedric, the one who got injured more was the latter. Professor Barrett sighed in relief when he saw that color was starting to return to Cedric's face. He then raised his hand and declared that the duel ended in a draw, cueing Lillian, Clara, and some of the medical team to enter the arena to check on the conditions of both duelists. 2 hours later. "I guess we have no choice but to suspend all classes for 3 days and allow the students to recover," Professor Reinhardt said after getting Professor Galena's report. All the students present were shaken from the battle, and they would need some time to recover. There was even a large number of students who had ruptured their eardrums, with some fainting at the scene, So the headmaster had no choice but to make this decision. Cedric was also in the infirmary and receiving special medical attention from Professor Galena. He had suffered a minor fracture in his skull, but thanks to her homemade elixirs, his injury was treated properly. However, to ensure that there would be no complications, she asked that Cedric remain in the infirmary for 3 days so that she could monitor his condition. Lillian and Clara didn't reject the professor's proposal because they were worried about his condition. Now I understand why Ethan is able to use magic despite being a dud. Professor Enjal pinched the bridge of his nose. He acquired a legacy. What a lucky boy he is. The professors inside the conference room all nodded their heads in agreement. A legacy was not something one could get simply by wanting it. Some were born with it, while some were able to acquire it during a fortuitous encounter. Professor Reinhardt and Professor Barrett both had legacies of their own, making them extremely powerful wizards. But between the two, Professor Reinhardt was stronger because he had something that Professor Barrett didn't have, and that was resonance. If someone had a legacy and could also use resonance, that person was bound to become an apex powerhouse of the world. This was what made Professor Reinhardt a very influential person in the wizarding world. If he fought seriously, dozens of wizards and witches would have to work together in order to get a chance to defeat him. He was simply that powerful. There was a saying that only a legacy could fight against another legacy in a one-on-one battle. Now that everyone was certain that Ethan indeed had a legacy and could also use partial resonance, influential and powerful people were bound to take notice of his existence. Fortunately, he has an ancient Wendigo as a bodyguard. Professor Barrett wiped the sweat on his forehead with his handkerchief. He and Professor Reinhardt exchanged a knowing glance with each other before the headmaster of the academy ordered everyone to rest. The two needed to talk about something important, and they didn't want anyone to overhear their conversation. Dud manner. Seriously, I'm fine, Ethan said as he laid on the bed. I just need some rest. I already drank one of Professor Galena's healing potions. Chloe, who was seated beside the bed and holding his hand, sighed before nodding her head. If you say so, Chloe gave his hand a gentle squeeze. She couldn't stop her gaze from staring at the rest of Ethan's topless body. Admittedly, it was an amazing sight, one that she didn't see often. If possible, she wanted to touch it, but she held back because she was worried that Ethan might have suffered some internal injuries. Earlier, Emma had beaten her in applying a healing salve on Ethan's bruises. Because of this, she didn't have a valid reason to touch Ethan's body without looking like a pervert. So, she settled with simply holding his hand and making sure that he was really fine. Chloe and Lily were seated on the bed, while Emma stood close to it. All of them were looking at Ethan with worry, making his heart feel warm. Do you have any news about Cedric? Ethan asked. He didn't look good when I saw him earlier. You don't have to worry about him, Ethan, Emma replied. He's being monitored by Professor Galena. He should be fine in a day or two. Ethan nodded. Good. The young man then closed his eyes to rest. He felt extremely lethargic after activating the 3rd stage of Legacy. Fortunately, he didn't have to forcefully activate his domain. Had he done that, he might have lost consciousness due to the fact that he didn't possess any magic reserves. He had used the power of the storm to fuel his grand aria. Because of this, he didn't receive an extreme backlash, though it was unavoidable that he'd feel drained. Now that he understood why Sebastian insisted that he didn't use magic in the duel, he had a better understanding of the power he possessed. Sebastian and Ethan's other half, who were in his sea of consciousness, fist-bumped each other, for they were certain that Ethan now had a better understanding of the might of his legacy, even when he wasn't fighting anywhere near the sea. A place where he had an overwhelming advantage over his foes, who were unlucky enough to face him on his home turf, where he could wield his power to its peak potential. 3 days after Ethan's duel with Cedric. It will be hard to meet again soon, but I will write you letters, Lillian said as she held Ethan's hand. Promise to write to me back." "Promise," Ethan replied as he gave Lilith's hand a gentle squeeze. A moment later, Ethan took out a bracelet made of blue pearls from his storage ring and put it on Lillian's wrist. "These pearls have a calming effect, and they could also improve blood circulation," Ethan explained. "They will also allow you to channel water magic more efficiently." Lillian didn't expect that she would be getting a gift from Ethan, so she was very happy. Perhaps out of happiness, she stood on tiptoe and kissed Ethan's cheek, making the latter stiffen. "Thank you, Ethan," Lillian said with a flushed look on her face. "I will treasure your gift." Ethan nodded with a smile while ignoring the two rascals inside his head who were repeating the words, "Kiss her, kiss her, kiss her," like the two bad influences that they were. His relationship with Lillian had become closer, and he was certain that if he kissed her, she wouldn't resist. But Ethan didn't want to take advantage of her feelings for him. There was a right time and place for everything, and he knew that this wasn't the right time for it. I can't take this," Ethan's other half complained and momentarily took control of Ethan's body. A second later, he pulled Lillian close to him before returning the control to Ethan's body. Before the young man could even wonder what happened, Lillian was already in his embrace and was looking at him with anticipation. The sea god's trident had also appeared behind Ethan, lightly nudging the back of his head. Due to Sebastian applying a bit of force on the sea god's trident, Ethan's lips pressed against Lillian's forehead, making him kiss the young lady in front of him. "Ha tilde, this guy is such a pain," Ethan's other half commented. "Good thing. Both of us are here to help him." "I know, right?" Sebastian complained. Since he has already decided to make her one of his future lovers, the least he can do is seal the deal. Ethan wanted to complain to the two bastards, but before he could do that, Lillian cupped his face and planted a kiss on his lips. A moment later, the young lady dashed towards the doors and left in a hurry. "Well, will you look at that?" Ethan's other half whistled. "Not bad for a maiden her age." "She has more guts than our boy, I'll give her that," Sebastian commented. "With this, we don't have to worry about her forgetting about Ethan. Mission accomplished." Ethan wasn't paying any attention to the two of them, because he could feel Lillian's power stirring inside his body. The Tide-bringer legacy was reacting to the legacy of the rivers and lakes, which belonged to the young lady who had kissed him a mere moment ago. Ethan's body shuddered as the two powers combined, making him feel as if he had just cast the spell Magna Amplifico on himself. "This is what happens when two compatible legacies merge together," Sebastian said, with an amused tone. "It's not just a simple 1 + 1 = 2 that results in just doubling your strength. The augmentation will become stronger the closer your relationship becomes. Just like all rivers lead to the sea creates storms and rain that travels to land, continuing the cycle and bringing water to the rivers and lakes." Ethan nodded his head in understanding before stepping out of his room. He would be there to give the Nightfall Academy a proper goodbye. Although he had some issues with Cedric, he didn't dislike Nightfall Academy as a whole. There was also the fact that he had stolen the ancient Wendigo from them, so he needed to put up an act that he had nothing to hide from them. At the eastern part of Brynhildr Academy, the flying ship belonging to Nightfall Academy was now hovering a few meters above the ground. The captain was just making last-minute preparations before they embarked on their return journey back home. Lillian was standing on the deck and waved at Ethan. He waved back, making Lillian smile from ear to ear. For some reason, Clara was also waving at him, and he returned her gesture as well. "Ethan, next year, make sure to transfer to Nightfall Academy," Clara shouted. "I promise to take good care of you." Professor Reinhardt and Professor Barrett couldn't help but shake their heads when they heard the beautiful lady's words. How could they possibly let Ethan transfer schools? He would not allow him to leave even if he wanted to. "Reinhardt," Professor Barrett said in a volume that only his friend could hear. "I know, Professor Reinhardt. I already talked to Lillian earlier." The two old men smiled evilly at each other. trying to poach their students in front of their noses. What a joke. They would poach students from Nightfall Academy instead. "Time to depart," the captain of the flying ship stated. "All hands to your positions." The flying ship slowly rose toward the sky. But before they could leave, Ethan waved his wand and summoned a water dragon. This water dragon flew swiftly in front of the flying ship and exploded into a shower of water. A moment later, a rainbow appeared, making Lillian look at the handsome young man on the ground with a gentle gaze. "Why are all the good men taken?" Clara clicked her tongue. With a laugh from the captain, the flying ship flew northwest, and it soon disappeared from view. It would be a while before Ethan saw Lillian again, but he hoped that the next time they met, both of them would become more powerful than ever before. The winter break was only a few weeks away, and Ethan knew he had another challenge to face. This time, he would be meeting with Luna's family, which was something that he was looking forward to the most. 3 weeks had passed since the battle between Ethan and Cedric. During that time, Ethan studied hard and trained even harder. He even made sure to spare some time to go to the library and research about the northeast region of Eastshire, where the Oswald barony was located. He wanted to have a better understanding of the kind of environmental conditions that Luna's family was living in and their way of life. Days passed quickly, and before Ethan knew it, the winter break of Brynhildr Academy was just 3 days away. In an inn in Limburg town, the sound of kisses echoed inside the walls of the room as the bodies of 3 people pressed against each other. Luna and Lily had invited Ethan to go shopping with them in Limburg town. Ethan naturally agreed to their request, knowing that he wouldn't be seeing Lily until winter break was over. But once they were finished shopping, the young lady dragged Ethan and Luna to the inn and booked a room for the 3 of them to stay over for the night. At first, Luna was hesitant, but after Lily talked to her for a few minutes in private, she reluctantly agreed, and the rest was history. The 3 made love with each other, and with every round that passed, Luna's shyness gradually disappeared, and she worked with Lily to make their lover feel good. Of course, Ethan did his best to return the favor, and the 3 of them made love until they could not move anymore. "That was amazing," Lily said before kissing Ethan's cheek. "Thank you, Ethan. How about you, Luna? Are you satisfied?" "Yes," Luna admitted. "It was an eye-opening experience." Ethan didn't say anything because he was dead tired. His 2 lovers seemed to have been very eager to milk him dry, and they both succeeded with their plan. Truth be told, both young ladies were feeling anxious about returning to their homes. Lily knew that she would be thoroughly questioned by her family once she got home. She was also sure that they would not be happy to see that she didn't bring Ethan with her to meet them. Luna, on the other hand, was also very worried, but for a different reason. She was worried that her father and brothers would gang up to fight Ethan, forcing the latter to fight back. "Ethan, just to be safe, make sure to kiss the fairies before we visit my family," Luna said as she lightly patted Ethan's chest. "They know that you are coming, so they will most likely prepare a welcome for you." The handsome young man looked at his lover, who was looking at him with worry. "Understood," Ethan replied. "I'll come ready for war." Luna nodded before kissing his lips and hugging him tightly. "Learn from this experience, Ethan." Lily also hugged the young man, pressing her body against him. "If you can't even survive Luna's parents, you'll have no chance of surviving mine." Ethan could only smile bitterly, knowing that what Lily said was true. If he were unable to overcome the challenges of Luna's family, then he shouldn't think of dealing with Lily's family as well. "This is what you get for having many lovers." Lily poked Ethan's nose. "Are you regretting it?" Luna was also looking at Ethan, looking for any signs of regret on his face. Instead of answering, the young man wrapped his arms around the bodies of his 2 lovers and pulled them closer to him. He then kissed their foreheads and continued to hold them close. "I would regret it more if I were not able to hold the 2 of you right now," Ethan replied. "So, rest assured, even if I have to go through a sea of fire and a mountain of knives, I'll do it just to make sure that the two of you continue to stay by my side." Lily and Luna glanced at each other and smiled. "You sure have a way with words," Lily commented. "Indeed," Luna nodded. The three continued to hold each other close until they finally fell into sleep's embrace. Now that their bodies and hearts were sated, they would be able to face whatever challenges they needed to face with a firm belief that, at the end of their journey, they would still be together like this. 3 days later. "All of you have a safe journey," Lily hugged Chloe and Luna. "Make sure to keep an eye on him, okay? Some country girls might snatch him away if you two don't keep a leash on his neck." Chloe and Luna nodded their heads seriously. Emma, on the other hand, stood a few meters away from Ethan, giving him space. Luna agreed to bring her along to serve as the young man's protector, just in case things went south. She had also informed her family about the number of people who would come with her to their barony, so she was certain that they had already prepared the rooms where the two of them were going to stay. The Oswald residence had 2 guest rooms. Chloe would sleep with her, while the 2 other rooms were for Ethan and Emma. "Go swift and go safely," Lily said as she hugged Ethan. "May fortune smile upon you." "You too," Ethan replied as he hugged her back. "Be safe. We will spend the solstice together, even if we are far from each other." Lily smiled before nodding her head. "Go now," Lily stated. "I can already sense my family members in the distance. You must leave before they arrive." Ethan nodded and summoned his wind dancer. They would ride their broomsticks until they reached Limburg town, where they'd take the train that would bring them to the northeast of Eastshire. The journey by train would last for 2 days before they arrived at a small town near the Oswald barony. From there, they would once again ride their broomsticks to reach their destination. It would be a long journey, but everyone was already prepared for it. The moment Ethan and the others disappeared from her vision, Lily was finally able to sigh in relief. She then looked in the direction where she could feel the presence of her brother, Kanal, and her sister, Lyall. The young lady breathed a sigh of relief because she couldn't sense her father with them. As long as the head of their family didn't personally come to visit Ethan, things would still be salvageable. At least, that was what she hoped would happen. "He left?" Kanal asked with a dumbfounded expression on his face. "He's not in the academy." "Yes," Lily replied. "He went home to see his family. Why? Is there something wrong with that?" "Didn't you tell him that he's supposed to spend his winter break with our family?" Lyall asked in a disappointed tone. "I want everyone to meet him." "Oh, I forgot," Lily smiled. "I've been rather forgetful these days, must be the cold weather." Kanal clicked his tongue in dissatisfaction. He originally wanted to have a rematch with Ethan in their territory, but it seems that he had to put this matter on hold. He wasn't stupid. It was obvious that Lily was protecting her lover from their family. There was only one problem. Their father and mothers were expecting to see him with Lily when they returned to their home. "You deal with father's tantrum later," Kanal sighed. "I'm washing my hands on this matter." "W8, how about we go and visit his family?" Lyall proposed. "Then we drag invite him politely to spend his vacation with us." Lily glared at her older sister, making the latter avert her gaze. Clearly, Lyall really wanted to see Ethan and bring him back to their family. "It's useless," Lily replied. "Even I don't know where his family lives, and even if I did, I would not bring you with me." The young lady no longer bothered talking to them anymore and started to walk away, headed to the south to go back home. Kanal shrugged and followed behind Lily. Lyall, on the other hand, stomped her feet and pouted before following behind her siblings. It was true that she wanted to see Ethan, but she was more eager to see how her parents would react after they saw him. She had been anticipating what kind of reaction each of them would have ever since she left to accompany her brother on this journey. However, after coming to understand that the entertainment that she was eagerly waiting to see wouldn't be happening anytime soon, she became extremely disappointed. Nightfall Academy. "Have you packed everything?" Cedric asked. Yes, Lillian replied. I had everything packed 3 days ago. I'm more than ready to go home. Cedric nodded. His gaze lingered briefly on the pearl bracelet that hung on his sister's right wrist before opening the door of the carriage, allowing Lillian to climb in first. When his sister was properly seated, he climbed the carriage and closed the door. It had been a while since they last saw their parents, and he was looking forward to meeting them after not seeing them for many months. He was also very eager to know if they had already taken the initiative to talk to Luna's family about making her his fiancée. While the carriage was moving to their destination, Lillian recalled the talk she had with Professor Reinhardt before she left Brynhilder Academy. After thinking about it for the past few weeks, she decided to have a serious talk with her parents about her future plans. She didn't know whether they would agree to her proposal, but she wouldn't lose anything by trying. Because of this, she had steeled her resolve and took the chance. If she succeeded, then good. If not, she would find other ways to make it happen. Training ground of Brynhilder Academy. They all left already, Nicole sighed as she looked up at the sky with her arms crossed over her chest. From a distance, a flying carriage being pulled by a Pegasus could be seen. This was the carriage that belonged to her family, which they had sent to pick her up from the academy. Nicole was both eager and afraid to meet her parents at this point in time, especially her mother. She had tasked her with an important mission, and she had already half succeeded in that regard. However, the continuation of the mission would have to wait a few months until after the winter break, when the mission hall opened again. Since Nicole was one of the few first years who were given permission to participate in the field missions, she would have more leeway with the things that she needed to do. Also, she had already gained Ethan's agreement a couple of months ago, so it was already a done deal. Her only concern was that the two of them wouldn't be enough to clear the dungeon that she was planning to visit after a few months of harsh training. If only they had given me more slots to make a bigger team, Nicole thought with a disappointed look on her beautiful face. If I can convince Sir Henry, Rowan, and a healer to join, we will be unstoppable. Unfortunately, I can only bring one person with me because of the restrictions from my family. My siblings are sabotaging me for the inheritance. I envy Lily's relationship with her family. At least, they care for each other. My family only wants results, regardless of the methods we use to achieve them. I'm just a convenient tool that they can use because I was born in the Asta family. Nicole sighed, because she didn't know if she was lucky or unlucky. The only thing she knew was that if she didn't produce results while on their family's expedition, she would definitely lose her place in the air wars. While she was pondering about these things, the flying carriage landed several meters away from her. Time to go home, I guess, Nicole mused. I hope my dear mother is in a good mood when I arrive. The Asta family was a knight family that was considered to be the first magic knight family of Eastshire. They were the ones who helped the founder of the royal family establish his reign, making their position unshakable. But like most wizarding families, they were never content with the achievements that their ancestors had gained for their family. They wanted more and nurtured many talented members of the family like Nicole, who was strong in sword, magic, and mind. The Asta family was the family that produced the strongest magic knights of the realm, and to keep that, they did many unspeakable things in the shadows, allowing them to gain the power that they hoped would take them one step closer to their ultimate goal. Their ultimate goal, to nurture a super soldier. It was for this reason that they started the Air Wars. A war where only one member of the younger generation of the Sta family would emerge victorious, regardless of the methods used to make it happen. The train finally came to a stop, and a few minutes later, Ethan stepped into the train station with a sigh of relief. If not for the fact that his lovers were with him during the journey, he might have been bored to death since there were limited things one could do on a train, and it took them 2 days to get to their destination. The name of the town they were currently at was Pewter Town, and it was the closest town that borders the Oswald barony. Chloe and Emma, who had also stepped into the station, shared Ethan's sentiments. Only Luna didn't seem affected, because she was already used to traveling like this. Just as they were deciding if they should use their broomsticks or get a carriage, Luna noticed two individuals who were walking in their direction with big smiles on their faces. "You're finally here, Luna," a man, who seemed to be in his mid-40s, said as he hugged the angelic beauty. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too, father," Luna replied as she hugged her father back. After a minute, the two finally let go of each other. The middle-aged man looked at Ethan and the two ladies beside him before breaking out with a grin. "You must be Chloe and Emma," Luna's father, Bruce, said with a smile. "Luna wrote about the two of you in her letters. Now, shall we all go? I prepared a carriage." Bruce held his daughter's hand, leading her away. Chloe giggled because Bruce didn't even bother to mention Ethan's name, which she found quite funny. Clearly, Luna's father intended to ignore him and not recognize him as his daughter's boyfriend. The man who had accompanied Bruce was one of Luna's older brothers, Dennis. He shot Ethan a glare before following behind his father and sister. Similar to Bruce, he had no plans of recognizing Ethan as his sister's boyfriend. Ethan had already expected that he would be receiving this kind of treatment, so he wasn't too bothered by it. He decided to play along for now until they reached Luna's home. When they arrived at the place where the carriages were stationed, Bruce pointed at one of them and glanced at Ethan. "Ride that one," Bruce ordered. Ethan obeyed and walked in the direction of the carriage. When Chloe and Emma were about to follow him, Bruce called out to the two of them. "It will take an hour before the carriage reaches our house," Bruce stated. "Why don't we all just fly to get there? That will shorten the journey by about 10 minutes. But what about Ethan?" Chloe asked. "He's a dud, no," Bruce replied. "Duds can't ride broomsticks." Chloe was about to argue that Ethan had the wind dancer, but before she could even say anything, Emma lightly tapped her shoulder, catching her attention. "Go with them," Emma whispered. "I'll go with Ethan. It will be better if we do it like this to diffuse the tension a bit." Chloe reluctantly nodded her head before giving Ethan a glance. Similar to Emma, the handsome young man only nodded his head as a way of telling Chloe that everything was fine. "How about you, young lady?" Dennis asked Emma. "Are you coming with us?" The assistant librarian was dressed in her usual boorish attire, making her look less attractive than she usually did. Dennis was simply asking her because she was one of his sister's friends and didn't want her to suffer like Ethan. "I'll be riding with him," Emma replied. "Thank you for the offer." Without another word, she walked toward the carriage where her master was currently at. Dennis shrugged and summoned his broomstick, ready to fly to the sky. Half a minute later, the four people took off to the skis and headed for the Oswald barony. Luna was currently riding with Chloe, and the latter was following behind Luna's father, who was flying toward the northeast. Dennis flew behind Chloe's broomstick so that he could catch her just in case something happened. All the men in the family were overprotective of Luna, making Chloe smile despite feeling annoyed that Ethan was being treated harshly. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, Emma was enjoying her alone time with Ethan. She didn't mind even if it would take the carriage 2 hours to reach their destination. In fact, she wouldn't mind if it took longer than an hour. The assistant librarian was currently holding Ethan's hand and resting her head on his shoulder. After the night that they spent alone together, their relationship had become close enough for them to act intimate like this whenever it was only the two of them. "Ethan, do you want my help with Luna's parents?" Emma asked. "No need," Ethan replied. "I will get their approval myself." "Master, remember this. Fathers are overprotective of their daughters, as mothers are to their sons," Emma stated. "If you can make Luna's mothers your ally, you are already half a step away from victory." The handsome young man smiled after hearing Emma's words. It was the same thing that his other half had told him a while ago. Instead of forcing himself to get along with Luna's father and brothers, he must aim for the people who could become his ally instead. As long as he was able to impress Luna's two mothers, they would do everything in their power to make their family members accept him as well. Of course, there was also Luna's grandmother and grandfather, but just like how Ethan didn't want to get chummy with Luna's grandfather, who undoubtedly hated him, he would just rub shoulders with her grandmother. He had already asked Luna about what kinds of things the ladies of the Oswald family liked, and he already bought all of them when they went shopping in Limburg town. To his surprise, Luna's two mothers and her grandmother liked chocolates. Because of this, he bought every brand of chocolate that he could find, nearly emptying the stock of all the shops in Limburg town. Fortunately, Luna and Lily were with him, so they prevented him from buying every chocolate that he saw on the store shelves. Just to be on the safe side, he also prepared a few things like accessories, since almost all ladies had a thing for them. As for Luna's father, grandfather, and brothers, of course, he also prepared a simple gift for Luna's father, grandfather, and brothers. Even though he was certain that they would reject them, it was the thought that counts. An hour later, the carriage finally arrived at the Oswald family home, where the real battle was about to begin. "You're not welcome here. Go back home," a man with dark brown hair said as he glared at Ethan in disdain. He was one of Luna's 3 older brothers, and his name was Eric. Standing beside him was Luna's grandfather, Philip, who was also looking at the handsome young man as if he were a thief who had been caught stealing their family's heirloom. The two of them were blocking the gate of the Oswald residence, preventing Ethan from coming in. Of course, they didn't mind opening the gate for Emma to enter, but the young lady insisted on staying beside her master. With great curiosity, she wondered how Ethan would deal with the way Luna's family was treating him. It wasn't only Emma who was paying close attention to what was happening at the gates. The rest of Luna's family was huddled around the family table and looking at a crystal ball that was as big as a basketball ball. "What a handsome young man," Luna's biological mother, Irene, commented with a smile. "My daughter has good taste." "Indeed," Luna's second mother, Brianna, agreed from the side. "I can now see why Luna likes him." My great-grandchildren are bound to look adorable with that kind of father," Luna's grandmother, Rhea, smiled. "I can't wait to hold them in my arms." Chloe, who was seated beside her best friend, couldn't help but smile after hearing the comments of the ladies of her family. Clearly, all the women in the family approved of the handsome young man, whom Luna had mentioned a lot in her letters. The men in the family, however, didn't like what they were hearing. However, they didn't say anything and simply glared at the image of Ethan in the crystal ball. "Still, I wonder how he will be able to bypass our 2 gatekeepers," Brianna chuckled. "Will he use force or will he use intellect? This is his first test, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he will deal with it." Irene and Rhea nodded their heads at the same time. They approved of Ethan's good looks. However, they had yet to know his personality. Depending on how Ethan dealt with their family members, they would decide to either support him or join the men of their family in chasing him away. Back at the gates, seeing that the 2 men weren't budging, Ethan knew that he had to use drastic measures in order to get past the 2 guardians of the Oswald family. His other half had already told him that he was being spied upon using magic, so he assumed that the ones observing him were Luna's family members. Because of this, the young man couldn't use force or anything that might hurt the 2 people in front of him. He knew that the moment he did something like that, all the good graces that he might have already gotten from his lover's family would disappear completely. Eric and Philip were feeling smug because their plan was perfect. If Ethan used force against them, everyone in their family would hate him. Of course, Eric and Philip had already prepared several contingency plans for how to deal with Ethan depending on what he would do next. In fact, all the men of the Oswald family previously had a meeting to discuss a foolproof plan to ensure that Ethan would have a bad reputation with the ladies of their family. They had already asked Rowan about Ethan's character and used the information that was given to them to plan accordingly. "Foolish boy," Eric thought. "Does he really think that he can come here and ask for my sister's hand in marriage? How naive." Haha, want to take my granddaughter away from me, Philip snorted. This boy is courting death. Suddenly, Ethan raised his arm. This gesture made all the members of the Oswald family focus all their attention on him. He's finally going to use force, Eric laughed internally. Good, do it. I'll even let myself get hit by you once. You're finally showing your true character, Philip sneered as he took out his wand. Let's see what you can pull off, boy. Emma watched as her master raised both of his hands, which were hanging loosely at the side of his body earlier. However, just as everyone thought that he would summon his wand, Ethan did something very unexpected, which made Eric and Philip look at him in disbelief. Ethan indeed raised his hands, but he did it so that he could remove the robe from his body. He then handed the robe to Emma for safekeeping. Eric had already summoned his wand because he thought that Ethan was preparing to duel with the two of them by removing his robe. However, instead of taking out his wand, the young man took his shirt off instead. Huh, Eric, who had taken a fighting stance, looked at Ethan in confusion. Philip, who had already aimed at Ethan, was also dumbfounded with what he was seeing. Ethan had removed all his upper clothes, exposing his deity-like physique to the two men in front of him, making them feel a bit inferior. The young man then slowly ran his hands over his hair, subtly flexing his muscles, which infuriated the two gatekeepers. Motherfucker, Eric cursed internally. What is this bastard trying to do? Damn, this boy sure is ripped, Philip thought. He reminds me of myself when I was his age. After running his hands over his hair, Ethan lowered his hands and gave the two men his most dashing smile. This made Luna and Chloe, who were looking at him through the crystal ball, blush due to how devilishly handsome he was. Just as Eric and Philip were thinking about what they were supposed to do with the bastard in front of them, the door of the house opened. Irene, Brianna, and Rhea came out and walked toward the gates with smiles on their faces. Eric, Philip, why are you blocking the gates? Rhea asked as she walked and then raised her walking stick, pointing it in their direction. Is this how you treat our guests? Do you want me to beat the crap out of the two of you so that you will learn some manners? You must be Ethan, Brianna said as she stepped past her son and father-in-law with a smile on her face. Come, we have waited long enough for your arrival. Young man, aren't you feeling cold? Irene asked. Although the snow still hasn't fallen, the winds are very chilly. It will be best if you come inside the house to warm yourself up. That's right, Brianna nodded as she grabbed hold of Ethan's arm. Come and make yourself at home. Indeed, Irene patted Ethan's shoulder while her gaze wandered over his amazing physique. We have a lot of things to talk about. Child, come and greet your grandma, Rhea said as she walked towards Ethan with a fawning smile. You plan to make Luna your fiancé, right? Perfect. I was feeling troubled because I could not find a good man for my granddaughter. It's a good thing that she met you. The three ladies basically dragged Ethan toward their house without giving Eric and Philip a second glance. Rhea even made a slashing finger over her neck, telling the two men that she would beat them up if they got in their way. Emma was trying her hardest not to smile as she watched this scene. However, it was clearly impossible. The method that her master used was something that even she didn't expect, and it somehow worked out like a charm, making Eric and Philip look at each other with dumbfounded looks on their faces. The men of the Oswald family all stood on one side of the living room, with their hands crossed over their chests. All of them had frowns on their faces as they looked at the ladies of their house. Irene, Brianna, and Rhea were fawning over Ethan and asking him several questions like, how did you meet Luna? Who made the first move? What do the two of you usually do together in the academy? There were more similar questions, and Ethan answered all of them truthfully. Once the three ladies were done asking him questions, he brought out the gifts he prepared, which made the three ladies have a better impression of him. Aside from the chocolates, Ethan gave them different accessories that he had carefully selected for each of them with Luna's help. Ethan gave Luna's grandmother a jade bracelet, which was said to improve health and blood circulation. He was told that Ria wasn't really a fan of fancy accessories, so he chose something simple and beneficial to her instead. The young man gave Brianna a magical chessboard, in which the chess pieces were made from black and white crystals that could move with a single thought. Luna told him that Brianna liked to play chess, but the chessboard they used back home was already old. Because of this, he didn't hesitate to buy the most expensive one for the angelic beauty's second mother. "What about my gift?" Irene asked with a pout. "How come you gave Grandma and Brianna their gift first? Shouldn't I be the first one to receive a gift?" Ethan smiled. "Mother, the gift I have for you is a bit special. In order to create it, I need you to do something for me." The corner of Irene's lips curled up into a smile upon hearing Ethan call her mother. It had a nice ring to it, especially coming from a handsome young man like him. "Okay, what do I need to do in order to get my gift?" Irene asked. "It's really simple, Mother," Ethan replied. "All you need to do is stand beside Luna and Father." "Who are you calling Father, you brat?" Bruce asked. "I don't approve of you as my daughter's boyfriend." "Dear, come here and stand beside me," Irene commanded. "Okay." Bruce didn't dare to defy his wife's order and stood beside her. Ethan did his best to keep himself from chuckling after seeing the henpecked husband follow his wife's order. "Now, the both of you, please hug Luna as if you are going to have a family portrait." Irene smiled and hugged her beloved daughter, even kissing her cheeks, which made Luna smile. Bruce didn't have a problem doing what Ethan was asking because he, too, wanted to hug his daughter alongside his wife. The three of them looked like a happy family together, making Ethan smile in his heart. A moment later, a mirror made of water appeared in front of Ethan. He was using the skill that Sebastian had taught him a few days ago. This skill functioned similarly to a camera and could record still pictures. The mirror made of water shimmered for a brief moment before dividing into 3 parts. Ethan then took 3 golden lockets from his storage ring and opened them. The 3 water mirrors flew toward the lockets and merged with them. He then checked the lockets one by one to ensure that everything was perfect. After being satisfied with the results, he then waved his hand, making the lockets fly toward Irene, Luna, and Bruce. The 3 people caught the golden locket and looked at the picture of their family inside it. "Since Luna spends months away from home, I'm sure that all of you miss her to some extent," Ethan said. "The same can be said of Luna. She misses all of you as well. With this locket, you will be able to see her anytime you want. But that's not all." Ethan grinned. The lockets he prepared weren't ordinary. After talking with Sebastian and his other half about his plan, the two helped him create the base of the lockets to give it one additional ability. This was the trump card he'd used to win Luna's parents to his side. "On the nights of the full moon, you will be able to talk to Luna directly using those golden lockets," Ethan stated. "This way, you will be able to talk to each other once a month. I hope you like my gift, Mother, Father." Irene looked at the golden locket in her hand before holding her daughter tightly. Although they could send letters in order to keep in touch with each other, talking to her daughter directly was still better. Even though the golden locket had limitations and could only be used on the nights of the full moon, it still gave them a chance to talk directly to Luna, making Ethan's gift very precious. "Thank you, Ethan," Irene said. "I'll treasure this." Even Bruce didn't have anything bad to say about Ethan's gift. With the golden locket, he would be able to look at his wife and daughter even in times when he had to leave their home to deal with the problems within their barony. Sometimes, he would have to be away for a few days, for some matters required him to travel to the territory of his neighbors to ask them for assistance. "That's unfair," Brianna immediately complained after seeing the golden locket. "I want one too." "Got them," Sebastian chuckled after seeing that Ethan's plan worked. "Hook, line, and sinker," Ethan's other half commented. "Well played, Ethan, well played." They had already expected that this was going to happen, so they had made a golden locket for each member of their family. Ria and Philip stood beside each other and hugged Luna, allowing Ethan to capture their picture together. After that, it was Brianna, Bruce, Dennis, Eric, and Luna's turn to strike a pose. When everything was over, each of them held a golden locket in their hands and had smiles on their faces. Although the men of the Oswald family still hated Ethan's guts, they now had a better impression of him because of the golden lockets in their possession. Rowan, who was still in Brynhildr Academy, also had a golden locket of his own. The first prototype of Ethan's experiment was given to him, in which he and Luna stood beside each other. This was also why Rowan didn't mind staying in the academy for a few more days before returning home. With this, Ethan had overcome the first hurdle of Luna's family. However, he was certain that his quest to gain her whole family's approval was only beginning.